Is it time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And
okay,
again, hey.
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him.
Not good. Believe me, not good.
Hello, dissidents.
Hello, dissidents. Welcome, one and all.
They told me we were getting Vosh.
Oh,
what are you doing
sorry.
here?
My bad. I didn't get the memo.
They promised us Vosh.
Oh, well, sorry. You're going to have to deal with a slightly more based version.
All right. Yeah, you are based. How are things going down there in the land of Dixie?
It is humid. It like you go outside, you feel like you need a shower just immediately. It's terrible down here, but hey, at least there's sun.
Okay. All right. It wasn't too bad here today, but it's been pretty nasty. Okay. So
wait, hold on. Just some business before we really get started. Did you clip Good Point Charles to add on the soundboard?
I swear to God, when I was clipping what I did actually clip, I said Tusker's going to yell at me. I did not. And you know what's really funny about that? If you notice, I cut it in the other day. What was that segment? I definitely cut that into something.
I don't live and eat and sleep your show. I can't remember what you cut that into.
Well, so you mean you're just making up the notes you send me every day?
Yeah.
It's just random.
It doesn't take much when you have a Marxist analysis to know where you're going to fall on things. So
is that all Chat GPT?
Yeah, it's just shit lib take.
Chat
go
GPT.
Chat GPT.
Give me analysis of today's Due Dissidents show.
Yeah.
Did you ever see that thing? Nathan Robinson did it when they first dropped Chat GPT to the public. Marx versus Batman.
No, I didn't. I haven't seen that. But I've
That's
tested
when
out.
everyone shit themselves, because I can tell you, as somebody who's read a lot of script submissions, that story was a lot better than 90% of what a human writer would be sending you.
What I can tell you is, from a Marxist-Leninist perspective and talking with Chat GPT about communism or stuff, I can wear it out after about 3 tries to where it finally goes. It just keeps giving me the most liberal take you've ever heard in your life. It just repeats that back to me just over and over again. Even if I offer different evidence, it'll be like, well, that might be true, but also, and it just goes back to the standard liberal line like over and over again. It's really funny.
Is that why all the AI stocks are crashing now?
Yeah,
because you proved it can't handle dialectical materialism.
Well, it can't handle anything that it doesn't have input to. I mean, that's the problem. If it's being
trained by shit libs,
is programmed by liberals, then all you're going to get is a liberal outtake from it. It hasn't done enough learning yet, or so they say.
All right, so let's go to our first story. We're going to get World War III out of the way, so we can get on to the fun stuff.
Yeah.
So the U.S. is sending carrier groups to the Middle East, folks. So stock up on those canned goods. The U.S. is sending a carrier strike group, a fighter squadron, and additional warships to the Middle East as the region braces for an Iranian retaliation to the killing of a senior Hamas leader in Tehran earlier this week. It is perhaps the largest movement of U.S. forces to the region since the early days of the Gaza war, when the Pentagon sent 2 carrier strike groups toward the Middle East in a very public warning to regional militant groups not to expand the fighting. Israel says it's ready for range of scenarios following the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Iran. Israelis have been stocking up on supplies, airlines have canceled flights, and travel warnings are in place with the region on alert for an Iranian response. Quote, "We've heard the supreme leader loud and clear that he intends to avenge this killing of a Hamas leader in Tehran and that they want to conduct another attack on Israel," John Kirby, the strategic communications coordinator for the National Security Council, told CNN. Quote, "We can't just assume that we are also potentially going to be victims of that kind of an attack. So we've got to make sure we've got the right resources and capabilities in the region," unquote. On Friday, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin ordered the USS Abraham Lincoln Strike Group to replace the USS Theodore Roosevelt Strike Group, which is currently operating in the Gulf of Oman, according to a statement from Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary Sabrina Singh. In addition, destroyers and cruisers capable of ballistic missile defense will also be sent to the Middle East and the Mediterranean Sea. The statement does not say which warships have been sent, but 2 U.S. destroyers in the eastern Mediterranean Sea took part in intercepting the barrage of strikes Iran launched against Israel in April. Austin also ordered the deployment of a fighter squadron to the region, Singh said. The U.S. already has the USS Wasp amphibious assault ship in the region, which operates with the 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit, capable of carrying out an evacuation of U.S. citizens in Lebanon should it be ordered. The United States quote, "The United States global defense is dynamic, and the Department of Defense retains the capability to deploy on short notice to meet evolving national security threats," Singh said in the statement. Kuwaiti Airlines on Saturday became the latest airline to suspend all flights to Beirut due to the current situation in the region. The airline said its last flight to the Lebanese capital will be at 12 p.m. local time on Sunday from Kuwait City. The company did not clarify when it would resume flights. Other airlines, including Air France and Lufthansa, have also canceled their flights to Beirut amidst heightened fears of a regional escalation. Within Israel, there have been reports of citizens stocking up at supermarkets. The Victory supermarket chain, now that's not a Marshall culture, the Victory supermarket chain, says sales of some goods are up 30% compared to regular sales. It told CNN that people mostly buy canned food, cereals, pasta, toilet paper, frozen meat, bottled water, and hygiene wipes. According to Benjamin Netanyahu, nothing goes with genocide like a squeaky clean ass. The Jerusalem, that's on the box. The Jerusalem municipality has issued instructions to people on what to do in the event of the city coming under attack. In a file, it said residents must be able to reach bomb shelters in 90 seconds. Quote, "Residents are advised to clean and prepare their bomb shelters in advance," the file says. You do not want a dirty bomb shelter in World War III. Iran has vowed to attack Israel for the assassination of Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. Israel has not commented on the killing. U.S. officials said the anticipated Iranian attack could occur in the coming days, and the U.S. is closely watching the region for any indications of how it might play out. Officials said the attack may be similar to the barrage of ballistic missiles and drones Iran launched against Israel in April, but it could also be larger and more complex coordinated with Iranian proxies in the region. Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah hinted that a coordinated attack on Israel could be in the works after Israel assassinated one of the Iran-backed group's top commanders in Beirut less than 24 hours before the killing of Haniyeh. Quote, because they have picked a fight with everyone, they don't know where the response will come from. The response will come separately or coordinated, he said in a speech Thursday. So this has kind of gone viral, this footage of people trying to flee the airport in Lebanon. The US, the UK, and France have all urged their citizens to leave. So let's take a look. So supposedly some people have been waiting at the airport for days to get out of the country. So it's definitely starting to get that last helicopter out of Saigon vibe in Beirut. You also had, I believe it was Cathay Airlines just canceled the only direct flights between Hong Kong and Tel Aviv, with other airlines probably to follow. So what are your thoughts, Tusker?
I mean, there was a whole lot in that. You had, going back to John Kirby saying, you know, and he kind of said it right there. He said, well, we didn't have anything to do with this, you know, and so the assumption that Iran will just attack us, that's not a guarantee because we didn't have anything to do with this. So to me, it even says at the State Department level that there's a little bit of a rinsing your hands of Israel's actions in that regard, because it was incredibly escalatory, on top of the fact that the strike that the Hamas political leader that they ended up killing was the main negotiator for the ceasefire and hostage negotiations and a peace, you know, to where we could work on either a two-state or a one-state or whatever type of solution we want after the war. So that was, I mean, that's also just a peremptory strike from Israel that indicates that they absolutely do not want peace. They are intent on drawing us in, and we're just sending some carrier battle groups over there. Not that we're involved, but just in case, just in case we need to swing some elbows around the Middle East. Like, we haven't done that enough in the past 30 years, you know. So
this is the game Israel has been playing for 76 years, and they're not even trying to hide it at this point. Netanyahu, Time magazine remarkably ran an article whose headline was something along the lines of Netanyahu wants the US at war in the Middle East, because he has every incentive. This war ends, he's up on corruption charges. Right. All of the political backlash he's faced for the way he's run his office has all been suspended by this. So this is the worst case scenario. You have a psychopathic maniac running this country who will think nothing, who has every incentive of forcing the U.S. into a military response that will ignite World War III. You know, given that these people's whole claim to that region is based on the Bible, maybe they should look at the book of Revelations, because it's supposed to start there.
Yeah. Well, and I will have to say, I don't know exactly what form it's going to take. There is kind of part of me that thinks it might be more of a coordinated attack. That's been the threat for a little while. And it seems like Iran has been actually playing kind of a role where they're sort of holding back, like Hezbollah and Ansarullah in that sense. I don't know how much longer that's going to happen. I do think that Iran is going to continue to be the adult in the region. And they're going to do similar to, maybe not the exact type of thing with the same style, because I think what they were trying to show in that fight was that they could penetrate Israel's air defenses. Right. I think this one would be that type of thing, but it would hit something a little bit more, probably don't want to kill that many people. They just kind of want to say, hey, we can hit, you know, another thing that's important to you. And then hopefully they'll leave it at that. Because I don't trust Netanyahu because he does want that escalatory war. And I think Iran knows that. So they have to be very careful in their response. Otherwise, they get drawn into Netanyahu's escalation ladder.
Well, and I think the U.S. knows that too. That's why they were so measured about how they handled Iran striking Israel in April. But this is the kind of situation that can quickly escalate out of control. And you never know. Iran could make the calculation that I believe Putin made. Like, hey, this situation is not going to get better. And the U.S. is tied up giving all of these armaments to the Ukraine war. Their stockpiles are depleted. They've got just absolute chaos in their government. When is going to be a better time than now to just use all of the resources we've built up in this region and just go for it? That's it. Let's get it on, and then may the best party win.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I don't, just because of the new presidential election of I cannot remember, Preshkin. I'm probably saying that horribly wrong. I apologize. But with his election, I think he wouldn't just go, down to 100 like immediately. He's not going to do that, I don't think. I think if it had been the other guy whose name I can't remember at the moment, maybe he would have had enough, or maybe he would have been willing to escalate. Plus, he'd been in a point of leadership and had all those connections, so people might have more easily followed, him. I don't think the new president of Iran would be able to make that kind of escalatory move at this current moment.
See, this is why we wanted Vash. He's a Middle East expert. He would have known those names right away.
Yeah, he could have. Yeah, I know. He could have pulled up Wikipedia for you right away.
Yeah. All right, let's go to some super chats. Eric Rousseau, what's up, man? Everyone ready for the final season of America the Empire? Grab your popcorn. No spoilers, please. Predictions? Pain. Another one from Eric Rousseau. Thank you. Real men have bonus holes. See how much they kick ass in sports. Look, I haven't done one of these gender things in a long time, so my take is very thorough.
And I'm so excited to be here for it.
Shall we say? Tusker's really. She called me up. I wasn't even going to do it. She said, "You're doing the boxing thing, right?" I'm really upset about that. Ken Texican, $25. Thank you, Ken. All we need is
love.
God, that's like when the guy dies in the movie right before he tells him where the plans are. Barry, 91. Looking forward to a new live unburdened by what has been. Aren't we all? Eric Rousseau. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. All right. Yeah. All right. I'll buy that. 25
okay,
and 25 for some cowbell.
And Eric Rousseau, if we missed that chat, just put it back in and we'll throw it up.
Let me see. Okay, here we go. We're on an express elevator to hell, going down. I don't know, man. I took a nice swim today. I'm feeling pretty good.
I took a nice swim last night. So
did you?
Oh yeah, it was so nice.
You got a pool. You got a pool where you live, right?
Oh yeah, at the apartment complex. And I just waited until it was late at night, brought a drink. There weren't kids out there, so and it wasn't like I really swam or anything. I just basically just soaked, took in some, caught up on politics, and had a couple drinks.
Yeah, see, it's so strange for a New Yorker, the way that we live as opposed to the way everybody else lives. Like, when I was a kid, those John Hughes movies were really popular. And it's like, where are these high schools with tracks and football fields and bonfire rallies? Like, we just got sloppy joes and 30-year-old textbooks. Where are these schools they're going to that look
Suburbia.
Like that? But then you go out to California, you go out to the Midwest, you see man, there are actually schools like that. That doesn't exist here. But the idea of an apartment complex with a pool, I go to the Y, man. It's very gritty. It's very gritty
Yeah.
by comparison. Alexander Hamilton, thank you for founding our economic system. It's doing very well for all of us. I've never voted Republican in my life and stopped voting altogether in 2014. But if you forced me to pick between Kamala and Trump, I'd have to vote for Trump just on basic principle alone, which is incredibly depressing. I said that on the show. I said if I had to, exactly, gun to my head, yes, I would vote for Trump. Fortunately, I am able to continue to support my candidate, Dave Chappelle, by writing him in this year. And the Greens can't even say anything. She's not on the ballot in my state. So I'm pretty sure I did vote for Jill Stein in 2016. I can't remember. I think I did.
Yeah, actually, Arkansas is kind of crazy easy, it seems, for third parties to get on the ballot, because whenever I'd gone in to vote in 2020, the poll worker at the poll, I mean, he was an elderly Black man, and I could tell, I mean, you could just tell he was a Joe Biden supporter, because the way that Joe Biden ended up on the ticket is because I guess they do like some sort of dice roll to figure out your placement on the ballot, which meant he was on,
Right.
Joe Biden was on the second page.
Uh-huh.
So the poll worker did like kind of an enormous, like, okay, you have to hit this button down here if you don't see all your candidates. So they're like 8 on one and then like 5 on the next ballot. So we have a ton of third parties in Arkansas. So I'll be able to vote for
Do
Green.
you?
I'm confident. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Even
Okay.
the PSL candidate was on the ballot in Arkansas in 2020. Gloria Del
Wow.
Riva.
Who knew? All right, so you're making a case for people to move to Arkansas. You're the first person to ever try to make that case in 100 years.
It's so captured by the two main parties that's one of the reasons they know that the third parties
they don't care.
They don't even have to fight them off.
Whatever. Sure, you can be on the ballot. All right, so here's a fun one, and I suspect that we're going to be covering this story a lot. It's sounding like Boeing Starliner may have completely failed. So, this is my normal Boeing sound drop. I'm leaving on a jet plane. But when we are covering this particular story, we're going to go with this. This is ground control to Major Tom. And if you know the song, that doesn't end well for the astronaut.
Okay, I forgive you if that's what you.
We are, of course.
I forgive you if that's what you clipped over Good Point Charles. If that's what you clipped over Good Point Charles, I forgive you. It's all good. We can go on.
That is what I was doing. I was clipping that, and I was like, "Oh God damn it! I didn't clip the Charles thing." All right, so this was fun. So there was a lot of reporting on this week because Ars Technica broke a story with inside sources that, they're not sending them back on this, more than 50% chance. It looks like NASA officials might be seeing the writing on the wall for the very troubled Boeing Starliner, which has marooned 2 astronauts up in space for almost 2 months due to technical issues. An unnamed informed source told Ars Technica that there's a greater than 50% probability that the stranded astronauts will end up leaving the International Space Station on a SpaceX Dragon capsule, with another unnamed person telling the news outlet that the scenario is highly likely. Yes, you're reading that right. Elon Musk is going to have to rescue the astronauts. Burn. NASA, I'm sure they're all thrilled about that in Washington. NASA officials are more cagey about what's happening on the record, a marked contrast from previous weeks when they expressed confidence in the Starliner's ability to safely bring back the astronauts. Quote, NASA is evaluating all options for the return of agency astronauts Butch Wilmore, best astronaut name ever, by the way, and Sonny Williams from the International Space Station as safely as possible, NASA spokesperson Josh Finch told Ars. No decisions have been made, and the agency will continue to provide updates on its planning. The Starliner project has been cursed from the beginning, with delays and hardware issues during the development and production of the capsule, which has seen Boeing eating something like $1.6 billion in losses. Despite technical troubles before the launch, NASA went ahead with Starliner's first crewed mission in June. While on approach towards the space station, Starliner experienced helium leaks and issues with its thrusters, forcing NASA and Boeing to delay its return back home with the astronauts so that engineers back on the ground could troubleshoot the problems. Many signs are now pointing towards SpaceX rescuing the stranded astronauts, according to ours. These signs include the space agency giving more than $250,000 to SpaceX for a, quote, special study for emergency response, unquote, and SpaceX actively training for the likely situation of the company sending a Dragon capsule to the space station to bring the astronauts home. If SpaceX does get the green light, expect the Starliner project to be shoved into the proverbial dumpster, according to ours' analysis. It would be a bad look all around because it would mean the American government had funneled a total of $5.8 billion into malfunctioning junk. If this scenario happens, with Starliner not deemed safe enough for human travel, we hope politicians and others investigate what went wrong, given that SpaceX has managed to build the immensely more reliable Dragon capsule at 50% less cost than Boeing spacecraft. What kind of oversight did NASA bring to the Starliner program during its development and production process? That's just one hard question among many. So I gotta say, Tusker, I'd be interested to get your take on all this, because on the one hand, Boeing, to me, in a lot of respects, is a story about the absolute failure of capitalism, in the way that it ate the regulatory state and also created an environment that encouraged this formerly storied engineering company to basically become a Wall Street oriented, financialized company that maximized profits over safety, to the point that the company is just hemorrhaging money, stock value, just being destroyed. But then again, if Ayn Rand were alive today, she'd be praising Elon Musk as the example of all of her ideas brought into practice, right? The individual industrialist who can do it better than the government. So what's your take?
Well, I mean, number one, I think the entire situation is just hilarious. The fact, because like here's the other thing about it: the Russians and Chinese could go get those folks immediately. They don't have to have Elon Musk like do all this stuff. But what a propaganda that would be for them, for the Russians and the Chinese. Could you imagine their state media they would have this rescue mission? They'd make ad promos and all that stuff about it, and it would just be.
If the Chinese really wanted to troll, they would send a North Korean rocket.
Oh, yeah, that would be even better. Yeah, and just just North Korean anthem the whole way home. That's all you got to listen to the whole way home. No, that would be great. So they can't do that. So then those guys are still going to have to sit up there for a little while. Like, fuck the astronauts. We have to save our own face on the geopolitical stage. That's funny to me.
Right.
But as far as the capitalism thing goes, I think in a lot of ways it is kind of working just fine. Otherwise, why would we even need all that money to the Ukraine war? Because all that's really doing is going back into the pockets of Boeing and all that other type of stuff.
Sure.
So the Ukraine war is just subsidizing their losses on space tech and flight technology. Meanwhile, they're funneling in the subsidies from the government. Oh, guess what? Now the government's going to spend more money to help Elon. It's going to counteract with Elon. So look, the private industry just gets money from the government just shoveled out to it, no matter what you do. And they still get weapons for war. So yeah, it seems like it's working just fine. Capitalism doesn't really mind as long as its entrepreneurs are making money. Doesn't really matter which side it is.
Well, see, this is the really interesting thing with Elon. He's a very good marketer, But at the end of the day, he makes these outlandish claims for things that don't get delivered or get delivered many years later. But on the other hand, he has built SpaceX into a successful enterprise. Now, a lot of the mythos around him is that he's an engineer. He's not an engineer himself, but he clearly hires people who know what they're doing. He knows what he's doing enough. Whereas Boeing now is trying to hire an engineer for its CEO, which it always had in the past. But then they started hiring financial people. They started hiring people with a finance hedge fund background instead of people with an engineering background. That could be part of why ultimately he's not an engineer, but he knows engineering well enough to hire good engineers in a way that Boeing has just gone after the bottom line at this point.
Has forgotten what Boeing's forgotten. Yeah.
Right. I mean, yeah, sure, it's a capitalist for-profit company within a capitalist for-profit country, but you're not going to make any profit if doors start flying off your freaking planes and your spacecraft can't deliver the astronauts back to Earth. And what's really funny is I think it's called Futura. The magazine did a hilarious article about this. They are very insistent that these astronauts are not stranded. You cannot say that they're stranded. They could go home anytime. We're just running some tests. They're not in any danger. It's fine.
Wait, what was that? What was that special study for emergency response? Emergency response doesn't sound like it's fine. It sounds like it's urgent.
They're using as evidence that they had them sit in the capsule during a meteor storm that might have destroyed the space station. Well, if it's a choice between that and sitting in the capsule, sure, you'll put them in the capsule. Doesn't mean that capsule would actually not burn up on reentry. God forbid. I don't mean to make light of it. Of course, we pray for these astronauts and their families insofar as our secular asses are capable. All right, so let's go to some. Hey, you got any Rumble rants, Jake? You want to throw up? Because I tend to forget that. Kenman G, thank you so much for doing an interview with Glenn Lowry. Thank you so much for not doing an interview with John McWhorter. Listen, man, if he had the stones, which he probably would not, I'd bring him on. And I would say exactly what I said to Glenn. Two ways to look at boxing. I think that would do pretty well. Two ways to look at boxing in the Olympics. One sport quit and then called someone not biological woman, but turns out to be true. She was attacked when no one cared about women's boxing to begin with. My take on how the pseudo right and the pseudo left reacted to it is very much a you're both terrible take. I thought they were all terrible. The other one goes against the Islamophobe argument that Arabic Muslim countries, Algeria, are discriminatory against LGBTQ plus IALMNOP, but yet accuse her of being biologically not a woman. It's complicated. We will get into it later. Believe me, Keaton is very glad he has the night off tonight because, when I get into it, I get into it. Biden 71. Tusker drew the short straw tonight. Abiding 71. Is this it, Kyle, Nina, Cenk, and Jordan K-Hive's new army? A few crusty bitches and a handful of ragtags. Last I heard, the Kolinsky family over there was supporting Jill Stein, right? That's the last I heard. Cenk goes where the wind blows. He's trying to figure out how to earn that $20 million Katzenberg check. What kind of where he has to land on the propaganda for that. And Jordan, he's a big Cornell person, isn't he?
Yeah, he is kind of a Cornell person. I don't exactly know where people like Kyle and Crystal kind of tend to fall. Like they have said the Jill Stein thing, but that's been a little while, and that's been before Biden dropping out and then Kamala Harris. And I feel like I'm seeing this like little shuffle from Crystal, and we don't know what her position on Israel is going to be. Like she seems to be kind of gearing up.
That's a pretty good Crystal.
Well, I tried to sound as unconcerned for the working class as possible. Did it work?
All right, Ken Min G. If you need any experts on Lebanon, two great people to interview would be Rania Khalek and Marwa Osman. They are both based there. All right, let's go back over to Super Chats. Wasim Garani, this won't be in media. Iran's Jewish community are demanding military response to Israel. And according to Doug McGregor, Israelis from north and south are piled up in central Israel. I mean, from my knowledge, listen, we've all been educated a lot since October 2nd. From my 7th, from my knowledge, there are not a lot of Jewish community left in Iran. Philip Blair, Israel is our South Vietnam in the Middle East. That is a very good way to put it. Even more so because there was never any oil in that region. It was all about the communist domino theory.
I would actually kind of say it's more like Korea or Japan.
Yes. More like Korea. That would be
Korea.
very good. South Korea, exactly. Wasim Garani, also Bibi is now hiding in underground bunker in Jerusalem below Al-Aqsa Mosque. Is that true? He's down there with the tomb of Jesus. Sparky, Russell, you fell for some BS the other day, hook, line, and sinker. You said that you thought the Venezuela election was fixed because the Carter Center said it was. Look, man, the circumstantial evidence of the fact that they haven't followed normal procedure on releasing the vote totals very strongly suggests that there might be something fishy there. Glenn Greenwald said the same exact thing when I watched his segment on it. He said the same exact thing. He said basically exactly what I said. The West has been interfering in that country for decades. It continues to interfere in that country. We should not be interfering in that country, but we're not going to tell you, no, nothing happened in that election. It's all on the up and up, because there's a fair amount of circumstantial evidence to suggest that there's funny stuff there. Fun fact, the Carter Center is corporate captured by corporations that had benefit from Venezuelan regime change. They sponsor them, and at nearly 100, Carter's out of the loop. Okay, well, you know what a great way for Maduro to avoid the perception that election was fixed would have been? To release the precinct tallies as they normally do. And that's why that's why Glenn Greenwald also said, we can't tell you nothing fun. I can't tell you it did, but I can't sit here and tell you it didn't.
Well, if I can kind of just slightly comment on the Venezuela thing, I actually thought that your piece on it was nuanced and reasonable. And that's because I do
That's
think
not how
that
you get ahead in this game, Tusker.
Well, what I'm saying is I'm talking about
people want it biased and shallow.
Well, that's not the only reason I'm talking about. I'm talking about, like, if you're not an expert on any of these areas and you're just brand new to it, it's very difficult to like, if you haven't been tracking, like, you know, the Western organizations that are involved in Venezuela, and you can't tie them back to the NED. It becomes very difficult for you to parse through a lot of the propaganda. So I actually thought that you had at least, you know, you were saying, look, we intervene there. We should hands off Venezuela, which is what it should be. Hands off Venezuela. Can't say that there's nothing fishy going on. But to me, nothing that you said really undermined, I think, the whole entire thing. I personally think that Maduro did win. I mean, I kind of tend to agree with Sparky. A lot of those organizations, even though they might have been good at one point, have long since been captured. And I've seen them involved in other kind of regime change operations. So it makes me really doubt whenever they're listed as sources. So I tend to agree. But, you know, I also agree that they could have released whatever election results, the preliminary standard procedure, which, once again, I don't know the standard procedure for Venezuela.
What you know they're trying to coup your country, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to give them that patina of legitimacy, if that is the case. So,
and I can see that.
Yeah, look, man. I mean, I went back and forth about this with a viewer the other day. Hey, man, it's I appreciate it, and we can all disagree or agree. I can't tell you definitely one way or the other about things I have no personal knowledge of. As Tusker here said, I think my take was pretty nuanced. We're going to cover that story again later, and my take is pretty much going to be the same. You get some people on all ideologies, left, right, MAGA, whatever, man. You say one thing that they don't like or they don't agree with, and they lose their shit.
Like I said,
Periodic,
you said the most important thing to me, which is hands off Venezuela.
of course,
That was the most
of
important
course.
thing to me. Just hands off Venezuela.
And if you care about Venezuela and you got a commentator saying we've been interfering in that country for decades, we shouldn't be involved there. You know, what do you care if you disagree with a specific thing or this or that? We periodically do stories we call mowing the lawn when we feel like we've got too many libs. We'll go and do a segment that we know will drive them crazy. And if we feel like we got too many MAGAs that have gotten too comfortable, you know, we'll do a story about how much we support workers raising the minimum wage in California. And that's why we have such an awesome audience. It is because if people talk about audience capture in this space, that's how you avoid it. That's how you avoid it. When you sense your audience, you got a big portion of your audience that will walk away if you do a certain take or a certain story, but you legitimately have that take and want to do that story, do it. Get them out of there. Get them out of there. Keep the cream. Get rid of the people who are going to fuck up your channel like that. All right. One last one before we move on. Ballroom Blitz. I'm a prepper. I bought some wild turkey. I love that. All right.
And thank you, Ballroom Blitz, for the $50. Appreciate that.
This is why we have the best people. This is why we have the best audience. All right. So this is another fun one. All right. So Kamala, she, you know, you might have heard that she's an airhead. You might have heard that she's just completely unsuited to running a card game, much less the country. But she really is proving herself, man. I think a lot of people are going to be eating their words. She went up there and she addressed inflation in a way that Allen Ginsberg would envy for its poetic abstraction. So let's see what she had to say about inflation.
What else are you going to do to fix this problem with inflation?
All right, thank you. Well, let's start with this. Prices have gone up, and families and individuals are dealing with the realities of that bread costs more, that gas costs more. And we have to understand what that means. That's about the cost of living going up.
What?
That's about having to stress and stretch limited resources. That's about a source of stress for families that is not only economic, but is on a daily level, something that is a heavy weight to carry. So it is something that we take very seriously, very seriously. And we know from the history of this issue in the United States that when you see these prices go up, it has a direct impact on the quality of life for all people in our country. So it's a big issue, and we take it seriously. And it is a priority, therefore.
Sounds like she's taking it very seriously.
Yeah, basically, Kamala, her rhetorical technique is this is a chair. A chair is something people sit in. It has 4 legs, usually a back, not always. Some chairs don't have backs.
Some chairs are unburdened by what has been, which is
some are unburdened by people. It doesn't have to only be people. Cats sit in chairs. I have 3.
Okay.
And they might use a chair. So we can't just talk about chairs in terms of people. We have to think of all creatures that might use a chair. Yeah, she's special. So all right. You know, this inspired me to take.
And also, I feel like she just locked up the kindergarten vote with that explanation. Good job, Kamala. That's going to win you the election.
Inflation bad, very bad. So, you know, you can really tell a person's personality when they run for president. They say it's like an X-ray that exposes everything about you. So let's take a look at how she's going about running for president. This is the web page. So let's see all that policy.
Okay.
I'm
All
sure I'll
right.
find it somewhere. Hang on. Where's the policy? Meet Kamala Harris.
Oh, I can donate 1,000 to Kamala Harris.
Yeah, yeah. There's a
Cool.
lot of donation buttons.
Okay.
Okay. As the daughter of parents who brought her to civil rights marches in a stroller, if anyone's curious, look up. She stole a story about being at civil rights marches from MLK. From a story MLK told. She changed it a little bit and made herself the person in the story he was talking about. So it talks about she's running for president, okay, and as vice president, stood up to extremists defending reproductive freedom.
All right.
Yeah, basically just vaguely talks about what she did in
I
the
mean,
Senate.
as far as standing up for reproductive freedom, what did she do? Just wear a pantsuit?
Pretty much. Pretty much.
Okay.
Actually, when I started reading this, I said, I would really like to knock all this down point for point, but we don't
Yeah.
want to keep Jake here until 2 a.m. again. So, speaking of which, hang on.
Hey, don't swing your camera too much that way. All right. We don't want to see what's in that corner.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Okay, that plugged it back in. Sorry, I noticed my battery was about to die.
Oh, well, it was very smooth. We couldn't tell you were having any technical issues.
You could tell anything was happening there. So okay, hey, it's a good thing I caught it, because you want to talk about being left on the show alone. That's what was about to happen is in about 60 seconds.
Yeah, I can't control the Kamala Harris, so it would have just been us staring at that.
So, all right. So there is no policy there. It's basically vagaries about what she's done in her career that, if you know anything about her career, are really obfuscate her actual career. So you got the take action button, attend an event, host an event. Okay. Here's where it gets really interesting. All right. So, the store.
I actually like that take action thing. There was an option down there for you. You can like host an event for her online. I think it's right up your alley. I think I saw.
Maybe we should. Maybe we should.
Yeah, it'd be a white boys for Kamala, but then turn it into like a Jose Vega action. Yeah, or just immediately intervene on all the white men for Kamala that show up.
All right. I think I fixed this.
You good over there?
Still wasn't getting power. I'm pretty sure. All right. Keaton's just going to have some editing to do. All right. So basically, all right. So we looked at her meet Kamala. But basically, it's a merch shop. I mean, really, it's a merch shop.
Can we still get that little girl was me t-shirt? Is that still available? Because I missed out on that last time.
She's got that image. She's got that image from the t-shirt that she sold, but she can't really directly reference that because she's the VP of the guy she accused of being a cracker. Kamala Bi Pride flag tee, Trans Pride flag tee, Harris Pride sticker 2-pack, where it's her in a rainbow jacket there, little Mork and Mindy kind of a design there. Looks a little like Robin Williams, had a hidden agenda we never realized.
That's definitely something I would put on my car. Drive that around town.
Second,
let's look at the second gentleman.
This is the kind of thing I look at and I say, can you just imagine the mentality of someone who would buy this and actually admit it? Like, can you imagine the mind of someone who would buy this shirt, who would literally want to buy that shirt? What kind of a person would do such a thing?
Why you know how often in the entire time that Kamala Harris has been VP and all that other stuff, do you know the amount of times that I've even thought about the second gentleman, Doug Imhoff? It's a total of 0. Why in the hell would anyone buy that shirt? Why?
But if you talk to these libs, I mean, some of them are like that. Look at who gives a shit about Kamala in college? Like who cares? But I guess somebody's buying it.
There's a gaggle of man buns somewhere that are all clinking those fucking mugs together.
And then right, defeat Trump. Together we will defeat Donald Trump again. All right. So the frequently asked, so it's basically just a big merch shop. Like you look at the menu, it's a merch shop. Now go to frequently asked questions. Okay. It's all about the merch. There's nothing about policy. There's nothing. It's a store. What's the status of my order? What does awaiting fulfillment mean? I mean, that could be a metaphor for the state of the country.
How long will it be
mean?
till I can signal my virtue? How long do I have to wait until I can stick my nose up at everyone that doesn't buy the merch that I buy? Yeah, it is. So
how long will I have to wait to have health insurance?
Right. So essentially what we've seen is her opening page, which is just the opening page, and it shows donate. Then you go to meet Kamala. It's just a very bare bones thing. There's almost no policy involved in it.
Yeah, there's no policy.
Okay. And then you go to take action and you can agree to campaign and then you can buy something.
Yeah.
That's the interaction with our presidential candidate.
That's it. We're gonna Keaton, he just dropped an article. Some of you might have seen it, and he did a shit post of it. So we're gonna play that. But the next shit post will probably be one that I want to do about this, because this is almost like science fiction. Like this is reminding me of some of the sci-fi written in the 50s, when TV was first invented. You had a lot of stuff that was projecting the idea of, you even have early visions of CGI, of like artificially constructed candidates and presidents. This is really the apotheosis of the idea of candidate as soft drink, of candidate as marketing campaign, completely devoid of substance, policy, purpose. It's just, she is an avatar for the deep state and nothing else. And they're running this experiment, it seems. Like, can we run somebody who's just terrible, but invoke her as a lifestyle brand? It's Kamala Harris as Lululemon. Can we just appeal to all the people who want their branding to be associated with this candidate without ever offering anything beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the way that politics has been going and the way of the cult of personality that's behind candidates and all this other type of stuff, I mean, it really does kind of feel that we've entered into this phase where we have become everything that we projected against the Soviet Union bureaucracy.
In many ways,
literally everything that we accuse the Soviet Union of being, here we are just kind of doing, coordinating the president. You know, they're just going to follow the next general secretary. The policies don't matter. The party's got it. And that is how it kind of feels in that way. So once again, I feel like it's just projection all over again. You know, when you get to the state, when the system gets to the state where you no longer have any viable political candidates, then it does have to go into a marketing campaign. There's no other way. And it does seem like they're really priming and testing the population for just how much can they take? Like just how much spoon-fed, you know, this is the candidate and this is a great thing for the country, and here's the narrative and the song and the dance and the merchandise of it all. It's we feel like we're teetering. I mean, it very much feels like a dying empire. Very much.
Yes, it does. But I am finding the Kamala campaign kind of fascinating on that level. The circumstances of COVID allowed them to run a campaign with a true puppet, where they could hide Joe Biden in the basement, and all of the inside information we got about how that White House ran, about how insulated he was, about how even household staff that would normally have access to the president wasn't allowed to come near him or approach him. You really realize we've always joked about it, but truly Jake Sullivan and Lloyd Austin and shadowy figures behind them have really been running the country through Joe Biden. And he has been able to not engage with the press, not give speeches to an unprecedented level. I remember they used to complain about Donald Trump not doing enough press conferences, but of course the media would never bring this up about a Democrat. How many press conferences have you seen Joe Biden do? I saw him do one. I remember he did one almost a year ago that completely crashed and burned, and I don't remember him ever doing one after that. I can't remember what it was. There was some scandal they sent him out to get in front of, and it just went horribly. But they got in the habit of not having to go through the pesky dance of even pretending that the president runs the country. They got used to having somebody who's not even going to give them any kind of pushback on anything. And I think with Kamala, they're taking that to another level. Like they already got used to running things that way. And now, okay, now we have somebody who's just completely a puppet.
I think maybe a little bit different. I think that they didn't want to do the Joe Biden they knew that they were going to need a candidate like that, in the future, but they had to run the game early. They had to get everyone used to it early because it was Biden was quickly becoming the only one that could beat Bernie Sanders. So they had to scrap all their other plans and they had to go with Joe Biden. They knew they were going to have to deal with that narrative and they knew they were going to have to mostly manage it and stuff. And they got away with it. And so now it's just like, oh shit, it worked, guys. And now they're just running it full press. They're going with it. They're like, we had no idea it was going to be as successful as it was. Let's just go. We got Kamala here. She's who we wanted all along. Now we can really run the game. So I think they're very happy with Kamala.
Yes, it is definitely last chapter at the American Empire Cafe.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go to some super chats. Soccer Papa.
Oh.
Great to see Hilda Gadea of Do Dissidents Tusker on. I'm ashamed to say that went over my head.
He's a friend. He's a personal friend of mine.
Hilda Gadea?
No, Hilda Gadea was married to Che Guevara.
Wow. See, I didn't know that. Sparky, use the ConvoCast with Pasta Jardula and Fiorella Isabella as a news source for election monitoring news instead of CIA curated news, and you'll be with it. You know what I use? Everything, and I don't rely entirely on anybody because that's how you wind up being captured. Michael Castillo, I loved the interview this morning, you gentlemen and women. Thank you, Michael Castillo. Thank you. That was a lot of fun. They were great. It was
lovely.
Really interesting.
I thought, and I watch Glenn Lowry every now and then. I respect his take. I think he's a very intelligent man. I respect him. So it was very nice to see you guys interview him. His wife is lovely. I thought it was a great conversation. Everyone check it out.
Yeah. Hey, man. He was very honest. Like you said, a lot of things. I'm sure he's going to have trouble with his partner, McWhorter, over there. He was. Yeah.
McWhorter, I bet you McWhorter can pull himself up by his bootstraps.
I bet you he can. All right, Sparky. Go crawling to the Russians to give the stranded astronauts a ride. That would be funny. That would be funny. Michael Castillo, I meant thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And others. Don't forget the others. Soccer Papa. Elon is a welfare queen.
He gets plenty of government subsidies.
Chris Bishop. Tusker does a great Crystal impression. Yeah, like now I'm like, we got to do a Crystal sketch with Tusker. I didn't know she could do that. She's a woman of hidden depths. Lawn Guy 1990. Have Haas on to talk American Communist Party. Maybe we will. Bloodthirsty Mayonnaise, one of my favorite screen names. They just traded a dementia patient who cannot speak for a wine mom with substance abuse problems who can't talk. Neither one of them could really talk at this point.
I would actually say that she can talk. I would say she can't really think that well. I mean, I know that you guys talked about the whole cognitive test, but I'm saying it's like she can't really even put the sentences together. Like if she has a sentence, she can read the lines. She can talk. But, it's hard for her to come up with stuff on the fly.
Yeah, except MAGA wants to raise the minimum wage. Look, these terms and definitions get very difficult, like who's MAGA, who's not. But I'll tell you, man, when I started covering the minimum wage in LA and I was out there at the time, I got so much shit from these people who have been indoctrinated with right-wing propaganda over decades, where they've connected culture war to the idea of workers standing up for themselves to get a higher wage. That was when I started saying you got to depeasantize your mind, because that's what it made me think of. You're a bunch of peasants. You've been conditioned to hate your own class and to have this very shallow understanding of economics, as if we're a country of yeoman farmers and small baking shops where, wages and input and output, that's all that's going on. There's no big Wall Street hoarding all the wealth behind that from which money to pay these laborers could be tapped. And
Wait,
they're all
Russell,
so
are you saying that you don't have like a quaint mom and pop bakery that you can just walk around the corner to and support a local small business and get some freshly baked bread? No, you don't live in that.
Okay, you know what's funny, given the way that people think of New York? New York is more oriented towards small business owners than most parts of the country are. Like, actually, you say that, yeah, actually, I can. In most parts of the country, you cannot. Most parts of the country I find very depressing, because it's all just Subway sandwich and Domino's and strip malls, and it's not like that here. More than it used to be, but not anything like the rest of the country.
And a lot of that has to do with the fact that New York you get street traffic. Unlike places where I live,
So
mom
much
and
foot
pop stores are
traffic,
spread
right.
out by
Right.
you have to drive with a personal car.
Right.
So actually that wide, like whatever it is, like city creep, that type of stuff is actually very bad for mom and pop businesses.
Right. Because nobody drives here. I you know what? I hadn't really thought about that. That's why we have a climate that creates a lot of opportunity for small business, because there are people constantly walking by. All right, we got any Rumble rants to get to, Jake? Yeah? No? Rue Poster, thank you for the $10. Was the Venezuela Election Commission headquarters set ablaze the day after the election by the neo-fascist opposition? Might that affect the release of potentially incinerated data? Hey, man, it's the first I'm hearing of that. Listen, this is what I hear from a lot of people. You have to have one take with no nuance, and it's got to be all in one direction. And I don't do that. If that's what people want, it's the wrong channel for you. Goo81. Either way, this boxing athlete was unfairly attacked. I agree. This Olympics has been a clusterfuck. And is anyone outraged that a volleyball player is allowed in after being convicted for? Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I haven't heard that. That sounds awful.
Yeah, no, a lot of the attacks
Allegedly.
on them were really over the line. And I pulled some tweets. We're going to get into that. Ken Texican. I hope I'm wrong, but I believe all we need is a bomb shelter. Going back to the 50s, baby. I have to secure my internet and get ready. Good knowing you all. Hope we all live beyond America's non-diplomacy. Yep. Shady deals. Arkansas politics are the only thing worse than the heat.
Yes, they're shady. Well aware.
Old
You know,
Stone or
brother.
1969. I don't care. It don't affect me. And his first world issue, so fucking first world. I assume you're talking about the Olympics thing. Yes and no, because I think that the fixation on that by the liberal class and also by the kind of IDW people, it's the end point of a decades-long effort to cultivate a left, as Caleb Maupin talked about in his book, that's ostensibly about Kamala, but it's not really about Kamala, to create a left with the rebellious pose of the left without the substance, without the class analysis, and without material demands. So that's why it's important to me, because I couldn't quite articulate that from the beginning, but it always rubbed me wrong that way. Like, it always struck me as like, this is a psyop. This is like to direct people into bullshit. And I always said, because me and Keem would go back and forth about this, like, is it important? It's a trap, but that's what makes it a perfect trap. I don't feel you can ignore it. Some people who are more ML oriented, will say, not necessarily you, but a lot of people will say, well, just ignore it. But I don't think you can. I don't think you can, because that's the trap of it, because they paint the left as being down with that, and it really turns off the working class people that you need if you want to have any kind of a meaningful movement going forward.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that we necessarily ignore it. We understand that battles are fought, I mean, on the culture war stage. I mean, that was one of the famous things, for example, that the Soviet Union did whenever we were doing the Jim Crow and the civil rights movement and all that other type of stuff. It was the Soviet Union after the murder of Emmett Till, I think it was, that, they had a couple of, your black radicals, that had done the whole We Charge Genocide thing. And the Soviet Union brought it to, the UN to put a spotlight on that.
Right,
so it's
right.
not that you cede those areas. It's just that in your own, organizing tactics in your own places and stuff like that, you have to come with actual principle and not engage in that stuff. You can knock it down, you can debate it, you can do anything like that.
I think you have to knock it down. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think you have to knock it down and make it clear that's not what the left is about, because they want people to think that's what the left is about. Yeah. Old Stoner. In 1969, I met the boxer and gender issues on the first world issue. Yep, we answered it. All right. One more, then we'll move along. You can throw it up. The Snuggler 83. A normal State Department would ban military-age men and women from emigrating into the U.S. from Israel until this is over. No, Israel's our client state. We're not going to do that. We serve them. We're completely co-opted by the Israeli state. We're ready to start World War III so that we can keep an ethno state in the Middle East. I think it's Sparky who always throws that up, right? Until Israel, we didn't have any enemies in the Middle East. Absolutely.
I still consider it the other way around. I think that we keep an aircraft carrier in the Middle East in the state of Israel, and because we need that aircraft carrier, we allow them to do this shit. I just reverse it. I don't think Israel is in control of us. I think we're in control of the aircraft carrier.
It's some of both. I don't think we want World War III.
We don't.
And I think Netanyahu is using the fact that we don't have a red line to push us into World War III.
It's a little bit of both. The situation allows a little bit of both, but ultimately we want that aircraft carrier more than we want anything else.
Sure. All right. So we are going to throw up Mr. Keaton's shit post.
I'm excited about this.
So I've read the article, but I haven't had time to watch the shit post. So I'm going to watch it now while you go smoke a bowl, whatever you're going to do.
Nicotine.
So this is Keaton. He's really angling for a political job with the Trump campaign. This is his audition video. He's giving them some political advice about how not to blow this campaign. So I don't remember what he said. I think he said there's about 15 minutes or something.
I thought you told me about 17. So
something like that. All right. So I'm gonna throw this up. We're gonna go full screen with it, and then we will be back to discuss.
So if you're a news junkie, you've no doubt heard the cliche repeated ad nauseum for as long as you've been paying attention. A blank time interval here is a lifetime in politics. A week, a month, a year is a lifetime in politics. And unoriginal as it sounds by now, it's true. If you think back to June 27th, when Joe Biden melted into a puddle on the debate stage against Donald Trump at the first presidential debate, even liberal pundits like Van Jones and Chuck Todd wasted no time afterwards suggesting, and in DC speak, to suggest is really to insist or demand, that Biden withdraw his candidacy. Now, at first, Biden refused, and Trump's margins in the polls grew slightly from an already commanding lead to a virtually insurmountable one. Then, on July 13th, Trump's defiant fist in the air photo op, after a would-be assassin's bullet grazed his ear, all but put the election on ice. Surely, with the Democrats in shambles and Trump fighting through gunshot wounds in broad daylight, the momentum of the race seemed irreversible. Until it didn't. Under immense pressure from permanent party bosses like Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama, Biden announced on July 21st that he would not seek re-election and quickly endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris, who secured enough delegate support by the following day to become the party's presumptive nominee in November. This, of course, came as welcome news to the 2/3 of Democratic voters who told pollsters post-debate that Biden should pass the torch. Kamala received a predictable jolt of momentum, including a record-breaking 24-hour fundraising haul following Biden's concession. Democrats, alas, were back in the game. They had a candidate who, at the very least, could go through the motions of running a campaign without the main story after every event, being whether or not said candidate collapsed at the podium. And sure, they forewent a legitimate primary process and anointed her in the 11th hour, as defenders of democracy tend to do, of course, but their reliably subservient base didn't seem to mind. And so, Kamala fever was on. But, despite Democrats' moment of optimism, the fundamentals of the race were still squarely in the Republicans' favor. The incumbent Democrat, Joe Biden, under whom Kamala currently serves, is mired at an approval rating hovering 40%. A July opinion survey by YouGov showed Trump with huge polling advantages on the handling of critical issues like inflation and immigration, 18 and 20 points, respectively. Not to mention, Kamala has a known record of dismal failure as a national candidate who quit before Iowa in the 2020 presidential primary to avoid a humiliating defeat. Don't forget she was also polling in 5th in her home state of California, behind juggernaut Andrew Yang. So if Republicans could stay focused and on message, Kamala's honeymoon period as the Democrats' savior would likely be pitifully short. Key word there is if. With an old boring white man like Biden at the top of the ticket, Republicans were more or less forced to run on meat and potatoes issues like the border and the economy, both of which favor them lopsidedly. But within days of Kamala's coronation, it was clear that conservative Twitter and right-wing media simply couldn't resist the newfound opportunity to switch gears and rejigger their campaign as an epic troll against a childless black woman who slept her way to the top. On July 22nd, Republican Congressman Tim Burchett attacked Harris as a DEI hire.
When you go down that route, you take mediocrity, and that's what they have right now as a vice president.
Are you suggesting she was a DEI hire?
100%. She was a DEI hire. He said he was going to hire, and she didn't. Her record is abysmal at best.
The following day, TV commentator Larry Kudlow added her whole history is DEI.
And of course, her whole history is DEI, diversity, exclusion, and equity. I mean, inclusion and equity. I mean, what does that tell you?
Then, on July 25th, a Fox Business panelist called Kamala the original Hawk Tuah girl. Really classing it up here.
Yeah, and then there's the DEI press secretary telling you that the DEI vice president is the future of the party here. And so the future looks kind of dim for the Democrats here, but this is no shocker either. Kamala Harris, she's the original Hawk Tuah girl. That's the way she got where she is. And the party's going downhill if it's in her hands.
That was tough. That was harsh.
That was harsh, even for her. Most recently, of course, Donald Trump himself thought it wise to litigate Kamala's identity as a black woman at a Chicago event for black journalists where he mused the following.
And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She is always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't.
To be fair, defenders of this strategic pivot point to some fairly obvious facts in their defense. First, Joe Biden promised in advance of choosing Kamala Harris as his vice president that he would select a black woman as his running mate. Second, It is true, of course, that from 1994 to 1995, Kamala Harris dated California Assemblyman and soon-to-be mayor of San Francisco, Willie Brown, a man more than 30 years her senior. Brown then appointed Kamala to 2 state commissions, evidence to support the theory that their love wasn't exactly pure as the driven snow. Third, while Kamala has identified as black throughout her life, she has also at various points touted her Indian heritage. Her White House biography boasts that she is both the first black American and the first South Asian American to be elected vice president. So, having laid out those 3 points, what's the issue with the Republicans' new line of attack? Their arguments aren't entirely without merit, and besides opposition research, digging up dirt on political adversaries, painting them in as negative a light as possible, these are all standard practice during every campaign season. So why then is this change of approach so ill-advised? Well, for one, it's off message. Again, Republicans have nearly insurmountable polling leads on the major issues of the day. Therefore, any time spent not hammering those issues is time spent losing. That's the simple nuts and bolts blocking and tackling politics 101 answer. But it isn't the whole answer. Recall Hillary Clinton's famous retort to Donald Trump's Make America Great Again slogan in 2016. Here it is in case you forgot.
America is great because America is good.
Now, of course, this is ridiculous, as America is neither great nor good. What America is, however, is nice. Americans, generally speaking, are nice people. Honest, humble, friendly, folksy people who mostly mind their own business and don't say anything if they've got nothing nice to say. And nice people that we are, we generally don't enjoy the kinds of excessively personal character assassination crusades now underway against Kamala Harris. Remember 1998 when Hillary the feminist's husband was caught soliciting oral sex from an infatuated young intern and lying about it under oath. The scandal dominated headlines that entire year from January through Election Day. The results? Democrats fought Republicans to a stalemate in both the Senate and the governor's races, and they gained 5 seats in the House of Representatives, marking the first time the president's party had gained House seats in a midterm since 1934. It had been 64 years since that had happened. Clinton had been caught in a truly despicable act and an even more despicable cover-up. Still, the Republicans' constant dragging him through the mud led to an electoral midterm backlash unprecedented in the modern era. So despite having both objective truth and, in most people's minds, morality and decency on their side as they pertain to the facts of this case, Republicans overplayed their hand in a way that too many Americans in too many states and congressional districts found gratuitous and mean-spirited, and they paid dearly at the ballot box that November. The GOP is charting a similar course today. Polls have tightened significantly since Biden's withdrawal. As you can see the chart there, marking the day he withdrew from the race. Trump entering with a 3-point lead, now down to just over 1. Demographically speaking, these attacks on Kamala also put Republicans at risk of alienating the very communities whose shift towards Trump is what put them in such a dominant position to begin with, heading into the 2024 election cycle. Through this point, they've made significant inroads with black voters and women voters, more particularly, in fact, with black women voters who were fleeing the Democrats to the tune of 28% as of June. You can see that graphic there. They went from plus 86 in 2020 to plus 58 in 2024. Now, I'm no expert, but it seems to me that branding your black female opponent a DEI whore, which is essentially what conservatives have done, is a great way to undo the gains you've made with black voters these past 4 years. Again, that's just a layman's hunch. Perhaps, though, more importantly than polling data, as these are the kinds of numbers that would account for shifting momentum dynamics, betting markets have registered a dramatic increase in Kamala's odds in the first 2 weeks of her candidacy, from 29% chance of victory on July 21st to a 44% chance at this recording. Yes, 44% is less than 50, which means that, yes, for the time being, Donald Trump is still the favorite in this race. He has Democrats spread paper thin across the all-important electoral map. His leads in Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada have put tremendous pressure on Kamala to both mount a comeback in at least one of those states and then run the table almost everywhere else with very little margin for error. This is far from an easy task, and at the moment, it's likelier she'll fail than that she'll succeed. But there's no question that the trajectories of the respective campaigns have reversed, and the wind is now at the Democrats' back. Given that the macro dynamics of the election still overwhelmingly favor the GOP, it can be no coincidence that as Republicans have gone negative, so have their poll numbers. It would behoove Trump world to do a proper gut check right about now before their knee-jerk impulse for trolling and mockery snatches defeat from the jaws of victory. What makes for good Twitter game doesn't necessarily win elections, and in this example, it could very well cost them the whole ball game. The whole ball game. Corinthians 2, the whole ball game. They've been served this election on a silver platter. If they run against Kamala, just as they'd have run against Biden, laser focused on inflation and immigration, the race is virtually unlosable. If, on the other hand, they get pulled off message and troll their way to defeat, they'll have no one to blame but themselves. Thanks for watching.
I unmuted myself a little too soon there. I forgot I was unmuted.
Yeah. Well, it was good. He can edit around it. He can edit around it. No, that was good. That was really, really good. And I know that because I feel like Keaton's kind of gotten some pushback for that take, like normie people, they don't like that. And I just want to second that. I mean, I know that this is it's out of topic, but we were talking about the Olympics. Well, a lot of the people that I work with are really, really heavy MAGA. They were, I mean, it's like 50-50 split. We've got a good mix. And I'm telling you, even the MAGA people because they're not super invested in politics. They casually take it in, right? With the whole like Olympics and the gender issues and that type of stuff, they were kind of disgusted with the treatment that the trans person had, or the alleged trans person had.
They're not trans. They're not trans. They're probably intersex, which we'll get into.
Right. But they were kind of disgusted with the bullying that went towards that person. And that's a normie. That's way more normie. They're not super invested in politics. They're not super dialed in. And they thought it was extreme. So yeah, those kind of like personal attacks and stuff like that, people do find them kind of distracting. And Keaton's 100% right. Trump can lose it if they focus on the culture war stuff for sure.
I was watching some clips from his Atlanta rally, and I didn't see his speech. I saw his proxies, and they seem to be not backing off that, but approaching it a lot smarter. Having Black people talk about things like this, that's smarter right there. Yeah. I was talking to Keaton about it earlier. One of them brought up Willie Brown in probably the best way you could bring that up. She brought it up in a family values way, saying, well, how do you think Mrs. Willie Brown felt about her being his mistress? Because he was still married when they were together. That's a much better approach than, that hoe slept her way to the top. She didn't take that approach. She took this more conservative approach. I said when we first covered it, and this came up in the Lowry interview as well. Hey man, a lot of people in the National Association of Black Journalists room liked when he started talking about her being Black by convenience. And it's very interesting because the media is really trying to just use this in lockstep. And you keep getting Black people on like CNN or the new, will all of a sudden go off message and say, well, yeah, her father's from Jamaica and her mother's from India. They're like, that's not where they want the segment to go, and they keep getting derailed. So look, Trump's a good troll because he does sense where those fault lines are. I felt from the beginning that one might not hurt him the way a lot of people assume that it does. Some of the other stuff, and I wouldn't advise he continue, but I wouldn't say he shouldn't have proxies that do.
Oh,
because
yeah.
that feeling is there. The last poll I saw, Trump still had 23% of the black community. Kamala was never beloved. And from what I know, I'm not a pollster, I'm not an expert in the science of polling. From what I've always been told, if the Republicans take more than 15% of the black vote, Democrats can't win. Much less 23.
I don't know. I'm not as into the polling science either. I don't have. Where's Cool Blue when you need him? To give
Cool
us
Blue.
Those,
he had a hot date tonight.
Oh, well, everyone needs a hot date, so you're off the hook, Cool Blue.
Every now and then. This is my hot date is with 4,000 people right now. All right, Jake, you want to run the patron scroll? All right. These are some of the lovely people that I am in a polygamous poly relationship with. I love all of you. Our relationship is really healthy, and we don't need to conform to those traditional bourgeois standards. We don't even have to meet, because I haven't met any of you. Some of you I've met, actually. But you are the reason that we are able to do the show. You're the reason we're able to do cool stuff like go to day X for Julian Assange, as we did. And I will be going to Chicago in a couple of weeks, less than 2 weeks, actually, to check out the shit show that is going to be the Democratic Convention. You can sign up at Do Dissidents at Substack, dodissidents.locals.com. And of course, we are at patreon.com/DoDissidents. If you do sign up, you get exclusive content. We do 2 exclusive patron shows every month. And when I go to the convention, we are planning on streaming some exclusive patron content, most of it involving me and Kit beating the shit out of each other over pizza. We're going to be getting into fist fights over that in Chicago.
I'm skipping that content.
You're skipping that? You're going to cancel your subscription and sign back up in September to avoid it?
No, I'm just going to boycott and divest from Pizza Wars.
Yeah. No, we're going to be going out there, and especially so much of it probably is not going to be safe for YouTube. We'll be doing a lot of stuff for patrons while we're there.
I support all pizzas, no matter how they identify. Chicago, New York pizza. I support all pizza identities.
I mean, that was the good thing about the fact that John's in Midtown fucked us. She didn't know any better. She didn't know any better. All my New York people were looking at me like, yo, man, you let down New York pride with this pizza. And originally I was going to order the Nona slice from Bleecker Street Pizza, but we were afraid that they wouldn't get there in time. We had a tight turnover between the shows.
Yeah.
We got to get Jesse back out here to show him that New York pizza is better than
Give him a real Nona slice, yeah.
But you thought it was really good, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, as far as that goes, yeah, compared to down here, I mean, we just have Domino's and a couple of different variations. We have some place that does probably a bad version of Chicago style, place that does a bad version of New York style.
Right. Yeah. No, that was pizza they're doing for the tourists in Midtown.
Tourists in Midtown are getting much better pizza than down in Arkansas.
Well, that's why they know they can make shitty pizza there, because why go to the expense of making good pizza when they're not, most of the people in that part of town, it's going to be the best pizza they ever had anyway.
Yeah.
But for New York, you had the Nona slice downtown. You know the difference.
That was good. It was really, really
right?
good. If you go to New York City, get the Nona slice from Bleecker Street.
Very good. Bleecker Street Pizza. All right, let's do some super chats. Midman, Mount Dew Ramen. Maybe Kamala is more baked than I. That could be one explanation for it. Kamala speaks in tautologies like a yoga teacher trying to bang their students. Good one, China Belly. Oh, Sparky. We're doing Venezuela next. I'm just going to be like, there's absolutely no complexity here. That's how I'm going to cover it. There's a reason Venezuela didn't follow their usual but not standard procedure related to U.S. interference. Go ahead and provide a limited hangout for the establishment. Yep, that is surely what we do here. At least Tusker knows the deal. You mean Tusker complimented the way I handled the segment and said it was nuanced?
Oh, don't quit now.
That Tusker? Philip Blair, did Kamala Harris talk like that as a persecutor? I think she seems like the kind of person, like Lady Macbeth. She likes to send other people out there to do the dirty work and just abuse people behind the scenes. Cool Blue 71. Yo, we needed your help with the polling data.
Cool Blue.
Yo, Cool Blue, if you can, later on, let us know, because I believe the number that I heard is 15%. That if Republicans get 15% of the black vote or higher, Democrats virtually cannot win. Let me know if that's true. I like due dissidence because with due respect, it is wise to have some dissidence. And that is why this channel is named Due Dissidence. All right. Well, hey, she hasn't picked her running mate yet. You might be in the running with that.
I feel like I keep seeing it's going to be Shapiro, but I don't know.
Now they're saying Andy Bashir. Who knows? I mean, my experience with Democrats is if you go with what's the worst thing they could do, that's usually right. So it's probably Shapiro. Tom, under Venezuelan law, they had 72 hours to release the full tallies, and the opposition called it fraudulent within an hour and demanded the tallies and went to the High Court for an audit on Saturday. Okay. Like, I'm not saying I know. I'm saying I'm not going to have a knee-jerk reaction. I'm not going to knee-jerk, no, that couldn't have happened. Well, lots of shit happens, man. A lot of things. The other Janet. All right. That's a good thing because I owe the first Janet child support. Russell, you're wrong about MAGA. We support higher hourly wages. We support working people. Listen, I use the term MAGA loosely because a lot of these people identify themselves as Trump voters, a lot of the people who come at me with that. But yeah, sure. I'm sure there are MAGA people. So maybe I shouldn't have put it that way.
We know that there are shades of gray within the MAGA community.
There are shades of gray.
We know just like every other group.
Most of the people who absolutely lost their shit when I was supportive of the workers getting a raise in California identified themselves as MAGA. So that's why I say that. But you're right. I mean, to be fair, it's not everybody.
Right.
Moose World. You're my favorite news channel now. Thank you. Gonna sub to that Patreon. Thank you very, very much. Side note, if you interviewed Nick Fuentes like Mike Tracy did our Glenn show, but made more chill and be the funniest thing ever, LOL. Man, when I saw that on my YouTube feed, I was like, they interviewed who? But I haven't gotten time to watch it.
I haven't seen it either.
But thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
MA 999. Thank you, ma'am. Me shoot skeet. You take that back. I have a man bun.
We know that every member of the man bun community comes in a variety of shades of gray.
Yes, just like MAGA. Thanks for indulging my Tusker crush, Russell. That's Sean Hurl. Oh,
thank you, Sean.
Sparky. The outfit running Kamala's campaign did the same for Gavin Newsom's campaign. They're known for not publishing any policy stances, so their candidates don't have to stick to or answer about them. Interesting. Interesting. Thank you, Sparky.
I can see that.
Oh, yeah. Glenn
to do a blank slate as possible.
Yeah, Glenn was interviewing Lee Fong about that the other day. This is like a specific California firm that is behind a lot of these people. Yeah, thank you, Sparky. Philip Blair, were you peasants not entertained by Mark Hamill in the White House briefing room? We covered that, actually. I did a cut where I worked in Darth Vader's voice. What is thy bidding, my master? Sparky.
I was entertained, but simultaneously embarrassed.
Yes. Yes. Sparky, most news is CIA curated. Ask Jimmy. Yeah, well, you know what, man? You've watched the channel for a long time, and I can see why you would feel that this channel is not aware of that or is in some way particularly attached to media narratives, right? Because that's exactly how we cover things. Sparky, Kamala Kushner, 24. Tyson, $10. Thank you, Tyson. Is that Mike Tyson over there, man?
Aw.
$5 bucks to get Keaton back probably costs
He
more.
has a new baby. I'm sorry.
Well, he's selling that kid, so he doesn't need your $5. He pissed him off. No, Keaton's back on Tuesday. He's back on Tuesday, which you're not the only one who can't wait to get him back, because now I've actually had to work this like a real job. Sparky, there's a difference between a new usually I just get to fuck off in my existential paradise. Sparky, there's a difference between a nuanced take and mealy mouth duplicity. Just saying, dude, it's like I'm trying to be a better person and you're making it hard, so stop. Soccer Papa, Vijay Prashad had an excellent short speech on hands-off Venezuela at a rally in the U.S. in 2019. Tusker knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, no. I mean, who is saying let's interfere with Venezuela? I mean, I think I've specifically repeatedly said we shouldn't.
I know
with
soccer.
Venezuela.
All soccer is doing is directing your audience, if they're so inclined, to look up Vijay Prashad 2019 Venezuela and watch a speech. That's all he's doing.
Anytime anyone says that Israel's, see, Tusker knows me better. She's like, we're about 5 seconds from Russell going on a rant. Anytime anyone says that Israel's our only friend in the Middle East, I can't help but think before Israel, we had no enemies in the Middle East. Thank you, Sparky. Aircraft carriers are obsolete, including land-based ones. All right, one more from here. Back from the road, depeasantize the mind sounds a lot like reproletarianization and educating the masses. Yeah, I mean, that's where I'm going with that.
And just before we go on, just because someone had mentioned the CIA and the curating, I would refer people to maybe In Search of Enemies by John Stockwell, former CIA agent. He's done, there are a couple of clips of him on the internet explaining exactly how the CIA seeds news stories into all these things that get picked up, but run by rooters, and then there goes the propaganda narrative. So John Stockwell's videos and his book are a great pickup for you guys.
Thank you, Tusker. Any Rumble rants? His Highness. Look, if Venezuela didn't want trouble, they shouldn't have built their country on top of America's oil. Hashtag keep come back. Hashtag no offense, Tusker. Hashtags don't work on Rumble.
That's all right, His Highness. I got you, though.
Snuggler,
We're not taking your call
83.
tonight if you call in.
Yeah, damn right. I wonder how much of this audience knows that the U.S. government doesn't factor energy and food costs into their inflation numbers. Reminds me of a certain definition that can change on a shekel. Interesting.
Yeah, Michael Hudson does a lot.
Do they don't do food and energy prices in their inflation factors?
No, there are a lot of things.
So what do they base it on?
You would have to, like, this is something if you would have asked me after I Keaton's here.
You insult Sparky, you're taking a huge pay cut. That guy's a good earner. Yeah, I saw him the other day. He drove up with the truck full of the furs and everything, selling them at a discount, and he always takes care of the boss.
That's schmata.
He's very good like that. He's very good like that. I'll tell you, Tusker can tell you this, Sparky. This is something you should remember, because I feel like you are passionate. You believe in this, and Tusker can tell you this as somebody that I've talked with about Marxist-Leninism. If you want to make an argument to me, that's the worst way to go about it. I'm a reasonable person. I do listen, but that kind of hectoring and then going into that kind of smugness and you got to look at this and this is the only place you can go for information. Like, you want me to go in the dead opposite direction? That's the way to do it. I almost feel like the communists had a meeting because they all stopped bothering me. And you notice how much nicer I am about that subject. Like I didn't think you guys were organized, but now I think maybe you are because they all shut up at the same time.
We passed a motion. We passed a motion in the Politburo.
Stop bothering that crazy bastard.
Yeah, because
around.
Believe it or not, you're on every Politburo's mind, Russell. You are the leading light. We really have to pay attention to what you say.
I mean, when there are only 17 of you, it's not hard to put out the word.
Yeah, we got
you
things.
know,
But one thing I will say,
are there to coordinate.
The one thing I will have to say about Sparky's comments is I didn't like. At the same time, I think sometimes you read things a certain way. Sparky's just trying to put some alternative information out there. He's trying to give you some references to look up, like blah blah blah. Sure, he says it in a passionate way, but he's got a limited, text count. You kind of got to shorten things. Like I didn't read it that way. I was just thinking that Sparky was just saying, "Hey, check this out."
I understand you didn't read it that way because he didn't repeatedly drop in these kind of insults about how you covered it, but. Without that, it would probably read more the way that you're talking about it. Which it's fine. It's a question of, do you want to persuade or do you want to have somebody tune out? Like that's really
you insult my ideology all the time and I'm still fucking hanging around. What's up?
You do, but do you listen? No. That's my point. Kenman G. I'm voting for Kamala because Michael Moore called her a savior. He's a progressive, so must be based.
Oh, Kenman G. I know you're joking, but ouch.
Ouch. Kenman G. UK progressives consider The Guardian to be most independent and trusted source of news. Okay. Yeah, we are going to cover UK burning probably on Tuesday. I didn't have time to really look into it. E.F. Husseau, cackling cocks to save democracy, Kamala 2024. You're trying to get us canceled. E.F. Husseau, no votes required if you are good at cackling cocks. Pablo Diablo. I keep saying we have the smartest audience. We're not. I'm making the case. Pablo Diablo 2010. What's the status of my order should replace E pluribus unum on our currency? Funny. All right, we're getting back. We're getting highbrow again. E.F. Husseau, do you think the propaganda machine can get Kamala over the finish line? I think it is quite possible.
Yes, I think it's possible too. I think it'll be difficult. But is it possible? Yes.
That's what's so fascinating about the whole thing. Like, wow, they're really just going to boil it down to a brand exercise and see if they can get away with it. It's one of those things. It's horrifying, but I can't look away. It's really interesting what they're trying to do. And the question of whether they can actually run a campaign like that.
I think they can. I think they proved it. And I think they're going to.
And I also think politics has gotten so tribal at this point that, people just vote their party. I'm sure everybody here knows some libs who are all talking about Kamala and posting the Kamala with the Statue of Liberty shit. That's how mindless politics has become. So, yeah, it's entirely possible. Anybody else? Pablo Diablo, 2010. Tusker have to disagree on Iranian president. He will play third fiddle to Supreme Leader in IRGC. All right, so let's go to our next segment. We're doing...
that's a good point.
Yes. We are going to the land of Venezuela.
Okay.
All right.
Sparky, keep it coming.
we want you to call in.
Yeah, please call in, Sparky. That'd be great.
I'm teasing you, man. I'm teasing you. All right. So, but you can call in. We are doing the call-in Q&A on the other side. In West Berlin, breathing the sweet air of freedom over there. You've never called in, right? Sparky's never called in. I don't know, Sparky could be ChatGPT for all we know.
No, for all we know. Let's start it over so Keaton can edit the start of the clip, the segment.
All right, Venezuela. Blinken congratulates Gonzalez on winning election. The U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has congratulated Edmundo Gonzalez for receiving the most votes in Venezuela's election, as more countries came out to recognize the opposition candidate as the winner of Sunday's disputed poll. Blinken spoke with Gonzalez and opposition leader Maria Corina Machado in a phone call on Friday and voiced concern for both of them, the State Department said. On Thursday, Blinken recognized Gonzalez as the winner of last Sunday's vote, citing overwhelming evidence. Venezuela's electoral authorities, seen by critics as favoring the ruling socialists, proclaimed President Nicolas Maduro the winner, saying on Monday that he obtained 51% of the vote compared with 46% for Gonzalez. The head of the CNE electoral body reaffirmed a similar margin of victory for Maduro on Friday and said it had now counted 97% of the vote. However, despite demands from the opposition and governments and organizations throughout the region, the CNE has still not released detailed vote tallies. The CNE's website has been down since Monday, which authorities have blamed on a hack without presenting evidence. The opposition says its own detailed tally shows Gonzalez likely received 67% of the vote, winning by a margin of nearly 4 million votes and earning more than double Maduro's support. On Friday, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Panama, and Uruguay joined the U.S. in recognizing that Gonzalez received the most votes. Argentina also followed the U.S.'s lead with its foreign minister, Diana Mondino, declaring Gonzalez the legitimate winner and president-elect. Others, including Russia, China, and Cuba, have congratulated Maduro. According to a diplomatic source speaking to the Reuters news agency, Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico are pushing for Maduro to meet with Gonzalez. On Friday, the Mexican president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, criticized the U.S. stance as in excess and accused Blinken of overstepping his boundaries. Celso Amorim, the main foreign policy advisor for the Brazilian president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, has cast some doubt on the opposition's vote tallies, describing them as informal data and arguing the parts were based on quick count mechanisms exit polls in an interview with CNN Brazil. Amorim emphasized that Brazil did not seek to interfere with its neighbors' internal affairs, but wanted to promote social peace for Venezuela. The top diplomat for Norway, which has attempted to mediate past disputes between the government and opposition, cited, quote, legitimate doubts over how the election was conducted in a statement on Friday. We expect the Venezuelan authorities to comply with the agreed commitments and to respect the will of the Venezuelan people, the foreign minister Espen Barth Eide said. The Maduro government has sought to brush off foreign critiques as interference in its affairs, accusing Washington of seeking to overthrow Venezuela's government. Earlier on Friday, the Venezuelan foreign minister, Ivan Gil, accused Washington of being at the forefront of a coup event. In a post on social media, Gonzalez thanked the U.S. for recognizing the will of the Venezuelan people. Once one of Latin America's wealthiest nations, oil-rich Venezuela has suffered a prolonged economic meltdown and the mass migration of about a third of its population over roughly the past decade. That largely overlaps with the tenure of Maduro, who blames U.S. sanctions for the country's problems. So I'm just going to interject. Maduro acknowledges that the sanctions have caused economic problems for the country, right? Okay, we can agree on that. We're not asserting that the fact that there's been this enormous migration out of the country as a result of those sanctions, in my opinion, has occurred, right? We're not denying that. So is it really crazy to say that there's so many desperate people who have been driven to that desperation by those conditions that they would run into the arms of a Western puppet in order to release those sanctions? That doesn't seem crazy. Glenn Greenwald doesn't seem to think that's a crazy idea. To continue, Anti-Maduro protesters clashed with police this week, and fresh opposition marches are expected on Saturday, which both Gonzalez and Machado are expected to attend. So far, at least 20 people have been killed in post-election protests, according to rights group Human Rights Watch. About 1,200 others have been arrested in connection with the demonstrations, according to the government. All right, so, on the other side of it, why does the West want to install this opposition so much? Well, we'll take a look at that. But this is Maria Corina Machado. They held a rally yesterday. We have some video of the rally. Here we go.
Confío en este bravo pueblo. En cada comunidad, en cada caserío, en cada pueblo, en cada ciudad.
So as we can see,
alrededor del mundo y aquí
fair amount of people at the rally. And hang on, I gotta go full screen to read this. She was saying,
no matter what you might say, she's got more people at her rally than Cornel West did.
That's for sure. I trust this brave people. We move forward with firmness, resilience, and trust. We are united. We know what we have to do. We are doing well. You are the heroes of this process. Venezuela will be free. All right. So, hey, everything that's going on with the Western powers and the pressure that they're exerting on this election, yeah, of course, this is about trying to get control of Venezuela. And I believe I put in a video. Yes. Okay, so we showed some of this the other day, but I think it's worth revisiting. Wherever you stand on this, in regards to whether the election was clean, at this point, I am of the opinion that they were not going to hand over the country to these people who the West has been trying to install in power through extra legal means for as long as Maduro has been in power, and since long before that when Chavez was in power. I saw somebody actually comment on one of our videos, when has a socialist country ever been allowed to operate for 10 minutes without interference? Never. Nope. Absolutely. So it's not hard to imagine that they would have just said, fuck it. In the end, it's not a fair election. In the end, it's not a clean election because it's taking place under conditions of Western interference, which is something that I fully agree with. So let's take a look at a little bit of this is Chris Murphy talking about openly what we've tried to do in Venezuela.
We could have used the prospect of U.S. recognition or sanctions as leverage. We could have spent more time trying to get European allies and other partners on the same page. We could have spent more time trying to talk to or neutralize China and Russia early before we backed them into a corner from which they are not moving. They are not moving. But all we did was play all our cards on day one, and it didn't work. And it's just been an embarrassing mistake after mistake since. First, we thought that getting Guaido to declare himself president would be enough to topple the regime. Then we thought putting aid on the border would be enough. Then we tried to sort of construct a kind of coup in April of last year, and it blew up in our face when all the generals that were supposed to break with Maduro decided to stick with him in the end. We undermined Norway's talks last summer, and then this March we released a transition framework that frankly is almost a carbon copy of the very one that was in front of the parties last year.
Maria Corina Machado.
Okay, so yeah, and there are other clips like that. There's a clip that was going around of John Bolton openly talking about coups that he participated in, coup attempts in Venezuela. Yeah. So I mean that's not even in question. Now, if you want to get a little glimpse of who the brave opposition is that Western powers are so excited about, it seems like all roads go back to Israel.
So, gracias. Thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you, and we'll stay in touch. And I promise one day we'll have a close relationship between Venezuela and Israel. And I believe, and I can announce this, that our government will move our Israeli embassy to Jerusalem. That will be part of our support to the state of Israel.
Wow, in God's will. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right.
Slay
So
queen.
you you want to know why we're so excited, why we're salivating about installing this opposition. There you go. How this is going to play out, it's an open question. Like I said, I am of the opinion that it's not a clean election in terms of just that. Whatever the context, and we've talked about what that context is, certainly the West should not be interfering there. Certainly we only give a shit because of their oil reserves. That's the only reason we've been interfering there this way. At the same time, it doesn't seem like they're able to really provide the evidence to deflect this growing international pressure. So
Right.
what do they do under these circumstances? It's an open question.
Well, and to your point, I mean, I don't know if the election was totally fair. I tend to side with the Venezuelan people and the Maduro, and I tend to think the election was good, and there are probably a multitude of reasons that we don't know at the moment for why it hasn't happened. But I would also have to say, considering how things are going about, one of the other reasons why we don't want Venezuela to be a good example in the area is because if Venezuela started to succeed with its
Right.
cooperation with BRICS, with
Right.
actually having diplomacy with the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians, and kind of engaging in that multipolar world, then it could potentially be the domino theory in Latin America, that all the other Latin American countries can look at Venezuela and be like, oh, well, they just held out. They beat off the West for just a little bit. And now they have all this freedom of movement and freedom to make deals and, have a little bit more sovereignty over their monetary system and their trade policies and everything. So I would especially consider that the Maduro government would be very concerned with writing it out, to take full advantage of the upcoming multipolar world. They'd be loath to give that up.
Okay. I mean, you want to talk about coup with this building international pressure around the election. I will honestly be surprised if they don't try, perhaps successfully, to overthrow Maduro. I will be very surprised if they leave it at a strongly worded letter.
Yeah, it seems like they're trying to go on a full-on attack. Venezuela is probably the stronghold in Latin America. I mean, Cuba is a stronghold, but Cuba's so small. Venezuela has the oil. It can potentially take control of its natural resources and really have a growth economy, and can really put the rest of Latin America in neoliberal shame, if you know what I mean, if they're allowed to grow. So yeah, I think that's kind of their big focus in Latin America, that Venezuela is the main target. So I would not be surprised if they did swing up their efforts, considering just the narrative push that's going on, considering that Elon Musk has been tweeting everything. I mean, I've seen so many posts about Venezuela with 500,000 likes, with the old videos of the statue toppling, and it's pure narrative propaganda.
Elon is tweeting about three things. He's tweeting about Tesla. He's tweeting about Venezuela. And he's tweeting about the woke Olympics.
Yeah.
Those are his three fixations. But we're covering one of them next, so maybe we'll get him as a patron. And we'll get him on board.
Sure. You know what he should do? He should send that Dragon capsule to Venezuela and snatch Maduro up.
Yeah. All right, let's go to some super chats. Sparky, my man. To associate Kamala, you better call in tonight, man. I want to talk to you. To associate Kamala with mediocrity gives mediocrity a bad name. True. JM, $2. Sparky, congressmen and senators are embarrassingly vacuous. Philip Blair, George W. Bush was a frat boy with an ominous laugh. Kamala Harris is a sorority girl with an ominous laugh. could go wrong? I have a book called Fortunate Son that was written when he was running for president, and it made a pretty good case using pretty strong evidence that he took a cocaine bust that his daddy got him out of. This became a big scandal because, of course, they did Oppo research on the writer, and they found that he had done some time in prison. He did his time, he was rehabilitated or whatever. And you want to see, it was one of the first times I realized how rigged the media was. And honestly, I'm a little embarrassed that from that moment I didn't become radicalized, because the story was not how the publisher had been pressured to pull the book, even though there was no evidence that its claims were false, because the guy had a record. The story was, how did it get past the publisher? Why didn't they know that? That was all of the reporting about it. Another independent publisher wound up picking it up. I actually have a copy of that. Sparky, I wonder if Fox News et al. Are purposely focusing on cultural issues while ostensibly being for Trump to sabotage his campaign. I don't think it's that kind of 4D chess, honestly. Sparky, great work, Wrestling Tusker. Yo, man, you don't have to say that. You don't have to say that.
We'll take it, though. Thanks, Sparky.
We'll take it. Nas M. Garlic in Midtown Manhattan has the best pizza. I'd never heard of that place.
Gonna have to go. That's a throwdown.
Man. Yes, and Miller, super sticker. Elizabeth Marshall, I retire soon and want to keep giving you money because this is the only podcast from which I write down quotes to repeat to other people. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
You keep doing that, you're not going to be able to retire. They're going to come for you. Dan Rickman, $10. Thank you, Dan. Two things. One, Tusker is the Giselle Bundchen of the online left. Two, Kamala is going full Hillary, attempting to do 0 unscripted appearances over a 90-day campaign. Even one would sink her chances. Yeah, man, that's what I find fascinating about it. It's fascinating to me. Like, can they really just run a campaign as a Nike swoosh? Can they just do that? Just reduce it to a brand, a name, a face, a merch store, and that's it. And can they win that way?
I mean, I really do feel like they can. And thank you, Dan. That really is high praise. Thank you. I really appreciate that. But it's one of those things we didn't have time to put it in the slides. But whenever we were talking about doing the Kamala piece, I mentioned that I kept seeing those ads with Kamala in it in that white suit. And then I happened to see something on Twitter where someone had looked at the necklace that she was wearing, this gold chain link thing, and they'd figured out it was the Tiffany. She's literally sitting there asking for small dollar donations, $5, $10, $20, give what you can. And then her necklace is a Tiffany's necklace that's worth $61,000. And she's asking for your $5 or $10.
We might, you sent that to me, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was too busy prepping what we were already doing. Maybe we'll do it Tuesday.
Yeah.
All right, Cool Blue. You the man, Cool Blue. Ours can win with 14% black vote nationally. Watch out for whites trending D. 2012 Obama and 2020, Biden won nationally by 4. Obama got 39% and Biden got 41% from WS. I assume you mean whites. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. So yeah. So I was in the ballpark, 15%.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Cool Blue. It's very kind of you. Shina Billy, Keaton has his priorities set like a true J-O. I assume you're talking about his admonition not to get into a cream corn wrestling match with Sparky. John Freeze, conservative Christians and liberal humanists both support Zionism. The way out is real spirituality and socialism. Here in America, that should include a revival of indigenous language and culture. That is a new one, man. I have not heard anyone connect those things, but I agree with most of what you're saying. That is an extra step. It's like sales. That's why they have the Act Now button right there at the top of the website. The more steps you have to take, the less likely you are to make the sale.
Yeah, that's the reason why the donate button is all over Kamala's front page.
Well, that is why. David Santucci, $20. Thank you, David. Whose vote tallies are fake? The people who claim they got 51% of the vote, or the people who claim they got 67%? Listen, David, man, it's possible, but see, this is what gets me very often about this political space. It seems like very often people just are not willing to consider complicated situations. Yo, man, if you accept that a third of the country fled, and I say that's because of sanctions, I say that's because of interference. It's not like I'm sitting here ranting about socialism. I'm telling you, it's Western interference. But if that's the case, if you accept that that's true, is it so hard to believe that people would vote for an opposition that promises relief, no matter whether it's, most people don't have time to be thinking about Western puppet and all this shit. They're trying to feed their family. So is that so inconceivable? You see, I think when we get locked into these just dogmatic ways of seeing the world, it makes us very blind. I honestly, I see a Freudian element to it. Caleb gets into Freud a lot in his book. That surprised me a bit. I think there's a tendency when I see people who are very attached to the idea that a nation can do no wrong or a leader can do no wrong. I see that Freudian thing of like, good daddy, the good daddy can't be bad, the good daddy. And I think that's a big part of why people react so strongly when you say maybe daddy's not good. I think there's this Freudian reaction of, no, not my daddy. That daddy is good. Yo, man, it's challenging to live in a world without heroes. And I think people very often, when you say, hey, maybe there's nuance here, they just don't want to do it. But I think that makes us dumb, honestly. That is a big part of why I'm so resistant to that way of thinking. I think that makes you susceptible to being a dupe, a sucker. It makes you susceptible to getting conned. You should always be skeptical. You should be skeptical of every person, every institution, every government, without exception. No one should get a pass.
I mean, yeah, sure. I feel that way. I understand that reaction, for sure. Like that kind of having that response to like a dogma. And I wouldn't say it's the yes daddy thing. I mean, I get it. I think that people are kind of playing a sides game. Now I know what side I'm on, but it's very easy for me to explain that. I mean, it's not because I like Maduro. It's not because anything like that. It's, once again, let's refer back to that conversation with Caleb. I believe in anti-imperialism. I believe that imperialism is the highest form of capitalism. I believe that finance capital represents the wing of corporations, big money, Wall Street, and fascism. I think that Wall Street and financial capital is the true danger. And so the reason why I support Venezuela in its sovereignty is because it is struggling against the imperialist system, regardless of their form of government.
There is not one thing you just said that I disagree with, and I still think there's a decent chance that that election was rigged because of all the things you're talking about.
Sure.
I could see if you're sitting in that seat, hey, man, if I were sitting there and the West was messing with my country for 20 years and they're trying to take over through these people, I'd rig the election. Like it's not hard to conceive that the people of Venezuela you just want to feed your family, man. And basically you have the perception that, okay, if we give the West what it wants, they'll take their boot off my neck. What's so hard to imagine that the people would vote for the opposition? And what's so hard to imagine if you're sitting where he's sitting that you would say, fuck that?
Well, right. And so this is kind of what I'm saying. Maduro doesn't even have the same ideology that I have. Maduro isn't running his Venezuela like a Marxist-Leninist government, but I can recognize that he's fighting imperialism. And I can say, like, even though I don't agree with Maduro 100% on some of his tactics, on his strategies or anything like that, I can work with Maduro. I can work with him because he's fighting against imperialism. And I don't have to agree with him on everything, Russell, just like I don't agree with you on everything. We've gotten into huge rows about communism.
You agree on everything.
But that's not right. That's not how it is. It's fine to disagree.
Right. Sure.
If you're working towards the same thing. And the simple fact of the matter here is the Due Dissidents show, I will say this, has the platform of hands off Venezuela.
Right.
That's our platform.
Right. So at that point, you're just debating about the details.
Right.
Right. I mean, why? Like, what's the big deal? Like, why do you care so much? You know?
Yeah.
I mean,
let's fight about the trans issue next. Let's go.
That is really what the world turns on.
Yeah.
Tony B, love yous guys and galses. Thank you. David Santucci, if you were going to rig an election, would you initially give the opposition 44% and then raise it to 46%? You might, rabbits. You might. Laugh 66. Love Tusker being peacemaker. He's smirky, Russ. Tusker is not just a pretty face. She's not just a pretty face. She's an excellent judge of pizza. Back from the road. No matter who won, Venezuela has the day off for elections, free transit to polls, paper records, and fingerprint scanners more reliable than U.S. Hey, don't look at me. I vote for Dave Chappelle in every election.
Thank you, Back from the Road. Excellent points.
Yes. Philip Blair, September 11th, 1973. President of Chile overthrown in a violent coup, plunging Chile into bloody dictatorship. All we need to know about Venezuela in 2024. There's not a word there that I would disagree with. Eric Rousseau, $2. Tusker makes communism beautiful. I don't think you're talking about Tucker Carlson, right? I think you meant Tusker, not Tucker.
Thank you, Eric. It's very sweet.
Heather goes rogue. I'm going to NYC for the first
Heather.
time in December. I'm starving myself now so I can eat only carbs when I go. All I want is the best pizza and the best bagel. Any recommendations are appreciated. All right, Heather, get the Nona slice. Even she knows at this point. Nona slice at Bleecker Street Pizza is amazing. For best bagel, it's actually a place where the guy grew up on the Lower East Side and he recreated the style of those old school bagels, man. It's hard to find that now. He does a kettle boiled, really old style New York. Zucker's. They've got a few locations around the city. That, in my opinion, is the best bagel you can get in New York now. Now, if you want a real Lower East Side old school experience, Kosar's has been there since 1936. But I don't think it's the best. The best is that. But if you want to have another old Lower East Side experience right by Kosar's is the Pickle Guys. 30 barrels of pickled corn, pickled watermelon, and obviously traditional pickles. So I would recommend that too. So enjoy New York. Send us an email if you have any other questions. David Santucci, I agree that a lot of Venezuelans support the opposition. They got 46% of the vote. That's comparable to Trump, right? Okay, can we agree that you don't know and I don't know? Can we agree to that? Because I bet you don't know and I don't know. Nostradamus, Russell, remember when you're arguing with these people about Venezuela? You're arguing with communists, so there's your first mistake. Listen, man, I have learned more from the communists in our audience than any other single faction, and that's a fact. I don't agree with them on everything, but they have a lot of knowledge that is very accurate and applicable. It's, we disagree on where you take some of that, but a lot of the things they've told me to look at that underlie things have really helped me to understand certain things like the Congress of Cultural Freedom. And I'm not saying they're the only ones who know about that, but they tend to talk about that the most. And that was where I first heard that.
We stand on business. I think that's the phrase.
They stand on business. All right. So why don't we hold the rest and we'll go to our final segment in West Berlin. You see my new shirt?
Oh yeah, looks like you've had a bit too much to think. Nice.
Yeah, that's my new one. All right, cool. So the Olympics, gender panic, the big story of the night, because I love to litigate this.
Okay, and I'm just gonna audience and Russell off the bat. I have not been following this. Russell's gonna have to explain it like I'm
so I'm
five
gonna
to me
learn
throughout
you.
this.
I'm gonna learn you something.
Yeah.
And then after this, don't forget we have the call-in show tonight. So if you are a patron, you can call in. If you're not a patron, you should become a patron so you can call in. We will be doing that after this segment. This is our last segment in East Berlin. IBA letter to IOC June 2023, boxer's DNA was that of a male consisting of XY chromosomes. So this whole story really blew up this week. There are two boxers, female boxers, who, according to the IBA, the boxing association that had jurisdiction before the IOC took it away from them, they claim they ran tests showing that they have XY chromosomes. So that would make them at best intersex. So some people are denying it. The IOC is denying it, but we'll get into it. The athlete who has ignited a worldwide controversy in Olympic women's boxing was disqualified from the 2023 International Boxing Association World Championships in New Delhi after two tests, one in India amid that tournament and a prior test in Turkey in May 2022. Quote, concluded the boxer's DNA was that of a male consisting of XY chromosomes, according to correspondence the IBA sent in June 2023, more than a year ago, to the International Olympic Committee. The June 5th, 2023 letter spotlighting Algeria's Imane Khalif reads, quote, this situation epitomizes the importance of protecting safe sport and the integrity of sport in which the Olympic movement is jointly committed to. Three Wire Sports has seen the letter and the test. Now, if you've been following this, that's an important point because a lot of people are trying to claim nobody has seen these tests. These tests don't exist. This outlet is saying they have seen the tests. And so presumably, and they're saying they saw the letter that was sent to the Olympics a year ago. So the IOC is trying to claim they don't know anything about it. They never heard about it. They haven't seen these tests. But apparently these tests exist, at least according to this outlet, and I have no reason to doubt it. So right there, I err on the side that yes, what the IBA is claiming is probably true. If it wasn't, why are they lying about having received these tests? So I'm going to cover the rest of this segment from that perspective. They are not trans, but they have a genetic disorder. The document shed new light on the controversy enveloping Khalif and as well Yu Ting Lin of Chinese Taipei that has erupted at these Paris 2024 games.
I'm sorry, Russell. I might be incorrect. Is Chinese Taipei in the Olympics? Is that Taiwan?
You know what? I don't know.
I think Chinese Taipei is Taiwan.
We've got the
smartest audience, the best
we have
audience.
The smartest audience. What do you say, audience? Is that Taiwan? Is it Taiwan? You keep an eye. You let me know. On Thursday, just 46 seconds into a preliminary round fight in the women's under 66 kilogram class, after Khalif's second right hand hit her in the nose, Italy's Angela Carini quit, saying it hurt too much. That triggered the worldwide furor. Khalif, in Saturday afternoon's quarterfinals, defeated Hungary's Anna Luca Homori, ensuring the drama will persist. Now through to the semifinals, Khalif is assured of an Olympic medal. Khalif fights next on Tuesday night against Thailand's Jan Jem Peng. On Friday, in the women's under 57 category, Lin defeated Satora Turdebekova of Uzbekistan in the prelims. She is due to fight Bulgaria's Svetlana Kamenova Sunday in the quarters. The controversy, which has seen the likes of Donald Trump, J.K. Rowling, Elon Musk, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and untold numbers more on social media, spotlights one of the most challenging issues confronting international sports. Whose rights matter more, the individual athlete or the collective? In boxing, it's all the more challenging because, unlike, say, track and field, the potential for one athlete to get seriously hurt in competition is all the more real. Since 2009, when the track athlete Caster Semenya burst onto the scene, this matter has sparked emotionally laden arguments on both sides. This was somebody else who had XY chromosomes, but this was in track. The challenge is perhaps most acute, involving athletes with what is called DSD, individuals with differences of sex development. DSD is an umbrella term for a group of conditions where someone's chromosomes or hormones don't fit the usual expectations of being male or female. Some say the individual athlete's rights matter most. Others insist there is a more vital collective right for female athletes to have female-only sport to be free from discrimination. All right, so we'll litigate that a little bit. But just to take a look at some of the reaction, and this is what I meant. Well, not this in particular, but we'll take a look at some of the tweets. Everyone has just been awful in different ways. This is very interesting. The International Boxing Association is awarding Italy's Angela Carini with $50,000 in prize money after she got defeated by a fighter with XY chromosomes. Now, the IBA is the body that did the tests, finding that these athletes had XY chromosomes. Now, there is a little bit of Russia versus the West going on here. This is part of why they're trolling the Olympics like this, by giving this person the prize money that theoretically they deserved, at least according to the IBA. J.K. Rowling, so listen, I have generally agreed with what she has had to say about these issues, but like a lot of people, they're really showing that they are everything people accuse them of being in the way that they are reacting to this. You're not talking about trans men infiltrating the women's category. You're talking about people who were born women who have a genetic disorder. Now, that is something that can be debated, and we will discuss it and the ramifications of that and how do you handle something like that. But to attack them in this way is really disgusting, and it really undermines their credibility on an issue that I have always, for as long as the show, I've always been passionate about. And it's very unfortunate to me when these people just really show their asses this way, because it really just invalidates everything else they have to say. So here's Rowling on August 1st acknowledging that the person has DSD. Someone with a DSD cannot help the way they were born, but they can choose not to cheat. They can choose not to take medals from women. They can choose not to cause injuries. Okay, so she's acknowledging that she knows this person has a genetic disorder, that they're not trans. The very next day, the idea that those objecting to a male punching a female in the name of sport are objecting because they believe Khalif to be trans is a joke. We object because we saw a male punching a female. No, you didn't. No, you didn't, because the person has DSD, which you admitted the day before. So why go out of your way to use this kind of language? And you know what? What the person says here you're giving it some validity, because what she's responding to, this person here says a main caliph should sue every single account and outlet saying she is trans. Obviously, I don't agree with that, but assholes are putting her life at risk. It is illegal in her country to be trans. The continuance of the blatant trans lie continues unfettered on Twitter. You know what? You're making this person look good with your argument, because you're kind of reinforcing the point. Why? Yes, it is dangerous in that country to be trans. Why do you continue to call this person a male when the day before you acknowledged that it's more complicated than that? And wokeness, classy, keeping it classy. For the second day in a row, a biological man won women's boxing at the Olympics. Yeah, it's more complicated than that. And Riley Gaines, who, again, I mean, I've done segments about her getting attacked at I don't think it was Berkeley. It was a college in San Francisco, though, getting attacked and held hostage. I've always felt that she's on the right side of women's sports, but she's gone completely off the beam. She's another one. As if the satanic display at the opening ceremony wasn't enough, the Olympics glorifies men punching women in the face with the intent of knocking them unconscious. A main caliph is one of 2 male boxers fighting women at the Olympics. A woman is going to die. Yeah, they're not male. They're not male. It's more complicated than that. So on the other side here, a couple of little input from the libs. Accusations that Algeria's boxer Amain Khalif is a man should be banned from women's sport highlights the intrinsic sexism of women's sport. Even if Khalif has male XY chromosomes as is considered on that basis to be a man, her exclusion would be discriminatory. So this is the other side of the crazy. This is the other side of it.
Yeah.
And hey,
and I can see that, because that only has 1 like. So, you had to search far and wide.
Well,
that engagement is off the charts at 246 views.
Well, you know what? I think Elon is suppressing a lot of that, because the libs have been going crazy with this, but on X, it's kind of hard to find. It's like way down in the algorithm on X. But this is very typical of the kinds of arguments that I've been seeing. And I think that does these women a disservice, because you can much more easily make the argument that somebody who was born and raised a female should be able to compete. Then you should not be using it as a backdoor way to try to argue that, well, of course, everyone who identifies as a woman, which most people don't agree with, should be able to compete. But they're trying to use it to push that broader agenda, which I think if you really cared about these 2 boxers, you wouldn't do that. You would deal with this.
I'm going to be honest. I have a lot of questions. I'm just going to wait till the segment's over.
All right. So this is pretty typical of the kind of arguments you'll see from libs. When I was in middle school, I learned there were only 2 genders. When I did my bachelor's in biology, I learned that there are also people who are intersex and the importance of the SRY gene. When I completed my master's in neurosciences, I learned that sex is already hard to define and gender is both social and in the brain, and that everything is a lot more complex. When people say it's basic biology, they're telling you they haven't moved past middle school. All right, so pretty much everything in that is completely fucking wrong, but it is very typical of the liberal line on all of this. Sex is a spectrum. It's complicated. None of this is actually based in any kind of science. So this article I would recommend if you want to take a look at this. Reality's Last Stand. The author Colin Wright has his PhD in evolutionary biology. Jake, can you take down the due dissonance thing? Thanks. The sex binary refers to the biological reality that there are only 2 sexes, male and female, and that these categories refer to individuals whose primary sex organs are organized around the production of either sperm, male, or ova, female. The sex binary does not entail that every human is unambiguously either male or female, even though the vast majority are. This is an important distinction because adopting the second framing is inaccurate and plays into the hands of activists who seek to debunk the existence of only two sexes by calling attention to the existence of rare edge cases, i.e., intersex conditions. But the first framing, there are only two sexes, is both biologically accurate and ensures that two distinct concepts, transgenderism and intersex, remain distinct. It also puts to rest the false notion that the existence of rare edge cases necessarily entails that sex is a spectrum and that we are all therefore intersex to some degree. This is really the argument that you see from gender ideologues. The idea that because there are intersex people, it's like saying, look, some people are born with claw hands. That doesn't mean fingers exist on a spectrum. That doesn't mean humans are not a 10-figured species, because you have these very rare cases. And even in those cases, on a chromosomal level, they are male or female. There is no third sex that produces something other than ova or other than sperm or produces both. There is no such thing. There are two sexes. Variations in secondary sex characteristics like testosterone production does not invalidate the entire class of male female. That's like saying variations in height invalidate the category of male female. You're talking about a bell curve where most people are going to congregate around the middle. Yeah, sure. I'm shorter than a lot of women. That doesn't
saying
make
all
me
people
not
that have
male.
curly hair are female and all people with straight hair are male.
Right.
You know.
Okay, so to continue. In recent years with World Aquatics First, there have emerged guidelines among some number of international sports federations that say athletes with DSD who go through male puberty ought to be restricted from high-level female competition. In boxing, this matter is all the more fraught because of a complex political dispute between the IOC and the IBA. You're going to like this next part, Tusker. In some, the IOC decided it simply does not like the Russian head of the IBA, Umar Kremlev, who is close to top Russian leadership. The IOC may say many other things, but that is the essence of the situation. And the IOC on June 22nd, 2023, withdrew recognition from the IBA, banishing it to the Olympic wilderness. I have a little more on that later from another article. On Friday, at the daily IOC news conference, spokesman Mark Adams had this to say, referring to IBA testing at the 2023 New Delhi tournament. What we see, quote, what we see now is that some want to own the definition of who is a woman. And there I can only invite them to come up with a scientific-based new definition of who is a woman and how can somebody being born, raised, and competed and having a passport as a woman cannot be considered a woman. If they are coming up with something, we are ready to listen. We are ready to look into it. But we will not take part in a politically motivated, sometimes politically motivated culture war. And allow me to say that what is going on in this context in the social media with all this hate speech, with all this aggression and abuse and fueled by this agenda is totally unacceptable. When Bach says unquote, when Bach says the IOC is ready to listen and ready to look into it, the obvious question, what about the IBA letter sent in June 2023? The IOC's position is that the gender and age of the athletes are based on their passport. Okay. So if you look at, I mean, you don't even really have to read between the lines of what the representative of the IOC had to say. This is a backdoor way of allowing transgender people to compete in women's sports. Because if you're just going to go by the passport, I mean, most Western countries allow you to change your sex. Right. So what kind of that's no standard at all. Now, we do have some video.
What's your insinuation? Is transgenderism the new doping?
What's whose insinuation?
No, I was making a joke. I was saying, like, what are you saying? It's a backdoor for the trans thing. Are you saying that becoming trans is the new Olympic doping? You know?
Well, some would say, but we actually look. The IOC has a point. We have some video of the test that the IBA ran in order to ascertain sex here, and it doesn't look entirely scientific to me.
Man, baby! Yeah! Yeah! Come on! Why won't this wig come off?
So look, that's how they test in Russia.
Those Russians.
So I don't know how valid that test really was.
That's a holdover. That's actually a holdover from the USSR.
I heard that. I heard Stalin came up with that test.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Khrushchev banned it after 1953.
So look, they're bringing it back now. All right. So moving on. So Quillette actually had the best overall article on the issues raised by this that I saw. So they have a chart here showing that what you'll hear from a lot of people is a lot of women have high testosterone, and that is very, very misleading. When you're talking about women with high testosterone, it's high for a woman. It is not anything like the male category. So there's a chart of how men and women, boys and girls, pretty much have the same levels of testosterone until they're at about 11. And then you can see from that point, there's an enormous divergence. As anyone going back to that lib meme, anyone who's taken any basic biology would understand that. So this is Quillette. Female athletes with high T, including those with polycystic ovaries, have T levels towards the top of the female range, not outside of the female range or inside the male range. Their sex is not in doubt. High T in an athlete who seeks to compete in the female category is code in international sports for either doping with exogenous androgens or being biologically male with bioavailable endogenous androgens. There's no indication that either Khalif or Lin is doping. So what that means is their genetic disorder is such that they have perhaps internal testes, as some intersex people do. Because if I'm understanding this correctly, you cannot have those levels of testosterone without testes generating them. As an aside, the reason many federations and the IOC itself for years used T as a proxy for sex is that it's an excellent one. Neither ovaries nor adrenal glands produce T in the male range. Only testes do. If you're looking for biological sex rather than legal gender, it's certainly more accurate than a passport. Now, here it gets a little more into the Russia thing. Olympic movement politics are a huge factor in this story in at least two ways. The first of these is the IOC's fight with the IBA. The IBA happens to be aligned with the Kremlin, which is separately hostile to the IOC for its stances on doping and the war in Ukraine. The second is the IOC's policy choice to align itself with trans rights advocates and against advocates for a sex-based female category. Here, the IOC is not just at odds with the IBA, but also with some of the Olympic movement's most important federations like World Athletics and World Aquatics. Unlike the IOC, these federations are determined to prioritize fairness and the preservation of the female category for female athletes. Now, this was the take that Quillette had, and it's pretty much my take. The female category in elite sport has no raison d'etre apart from the biological sex differences that lead to sex differences in performance and the gap between the top male and female athletes. The suggestion that we could choose to rationalize the category differently, for instance, on the basis of self-declared gender identity, or that we could make increasingly numerous exceptions in the interests of inclusion, as the IOC seems to have done, to allow Khalif and Lynn to compete in Paris has no legs outside of certain progressive enclaves. Second, any eligibility standard like the IOC's framework that denies or disregards sex-linked biology is necessarily category defeating. Finally, federations that are committed to the female category and to one-for-one equality for their female athletes must step up and do two things. They must craft evidence-based rules and then stick to them consistently. And they must seriously embrace other opportunities to welcome gender diversity within their sports. Yes, why have women's sports if everyone can play in them? That is why we have women's sports, because women, it's unfair to make them compete against men. They're going to lose all day and twice on Sunday. Why would you have women's sports?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I agree with that. I mean, I absolutely do agree with that take. I mean, if you have some type of like clear physical superiority, then no, it shouldn't be allowed. But my question is like, this lost me in a lot of different ways. I don't know what the definition of intersex means. I mean, there's so many things that go into this. This sounds like an entire different language to me. And that's kind of what I meant by like, I really don't understand what the controversy is. So then they say they're XY. Well, I thought XY meant male.
They have male.
Then,
they have a genetic disorder. They were born presumably with vaginas. They would certainly in Algeria, they would not have identified them at birth as female, but chromosomally they're male. They have male testosterone. They have male muscle development. They're not now in terms of the gametes, and that is what the Reality's Last Stand article was pointing out, and biologists that are not afraid to lose their careers in the West will continue to point out, there's no third sex in regards to gametes. You produce ova or you produce sperm.
Yeah.
But there are certain people who have sex characteristics of both sexes, in spite of the fact that ultimately on that level, they are going to default to one sex or the other. So given what the article is saying regarding testosterone, presumably they have testes.
but that's kind of what I'm talking about. Like, what is it that people are going on? Is it the XY chromosome? Because XX is female, XY is male.
The IBA concluded, and they had this already in their guidelines, that if you have XY chromosomes, male chromosomes, you are not eligible to compete in the women's category because of advantages that inherently gives you. Now, some people will say, why were they allowed to compete until then? Because they weren't doing that testing until then. They didn't do the testing. So that's
what's
why
the argument against that
that's why
testing?
all of a sudden
why is that testing not inclusive?
I think what they're saying that there's an ideological conflict here where the IOC is really siding with trans activists and trying to, what can we conclude from a standard of whatever your passport says, other than that the IOC favors going on I identify as a woman standard for competition. Now, if you're going to have a standard like that, why have women's sports? Like it completely eliminates the purpose of it. Now, I think that's a non-starter, and it's a non-starter for most people. When you talk about a particular situation like this, which as the Reality's Last Stand article points out, don't allow the activists to make these the same issue. It's not the same issue. It's two different issues.
I don't think it is.
These are not people who are born men who are competing as women. These are people who are born women with intersex characteristics, with male characteristics that give them a competitive advantage. So some of the arguments you'll hear from people is, well, but they were beaten by women. Okay, well, the Yankees get beaten all the time, but are you going to tell me that having a payroll that dwarfs other teams doesn't give them an unfair advantage overall? Why have they won so many World Series versus the Toronto team, right? Because they have this enormous payroll. Sport is complicated, man. Sure. And their tactics and everything. Sure, they're going to lose sometimes. They made it to the Olympics, didn't they? So clearly they're winning a lot more than they're losing. And the argument is, well, this does confer a certain advantage. Now, The most reasonable counter argument is, well, what about Michael Phelps? Michael Phelps had certain genetic abnormalities that made him such an effective swimmer. And some people will
Yeah,
say,
I think what he
well,
was is he was a human tapeworm. Like he could
he,
just eat whatever, and he wingspan increased, and
well, yeah, he had this freakish wingspan, and I was talking to Keem before. I'm not sure if this is true, but he didn't build up what do you call it in the muscles? The
lactic acid.
lactic acid, exactly. He didn't build it up like another person would, so he had certain mutations. So do you disqualify him? I think that's an interesting place to go, but I would counter with this. Okay, so what if you had somebody who wanted to compete as a marksman that had a genetic disorder where they had bionic eyes, they had like telescopic eyes? Would that be fair for that person to compete as a marksman? Would we allow it? Particularly now, even if you want to have this argument in regards to track and other types of competitions, when you're talking about combat sports,
Yeah.
that shouldn't be a hard one, right? I mean, because someone could die there. And people who want to direct the attention towards, well, these people trained all their lives. Well, so did the people they're fighting. Not everybody gets to be everything. If you want to be a basketball player and you wind up my height, not that I ever did want to be a basketball player, but if I did, I wouldn't get to play. Would that mean they have to let me on a basketball team because it's my dream? I wanted to play basketball. Not everyone gets to do everything. That's the way it is. It sucks. In order to keep that category, particularly when you're talking about combat sports, in order to keep it safe.
I just feel like I have yet to hear any argument from any side of the ideology that is either like activist pro-trans or activist anti-trans. I have yet to hear of any sensible type of like middle ground or someone really wanting to find a solution to it. I mean, I know we kind of bandy it about and we talk about it every now and then, but it's just like, I just learned like 15 different genders tonight. I mean, so like I'm already behind, like, and I don't know what we're like. It's so difficult to understand what we're arguing against. It seemed like whenever we had this whole entire issue about like, okay, can we at least agree that like people that have transitioned after male puberty, it's kind of unfair. It kind of almost felt like everyone was sort of on that same page. Like everyone had kind of gotten to that point where they go, okay, well,
well, that's why these issues should not be the same issue. They're
but
not
now
the same
we're talking, now we've boiled it down to chromosomes. Now we got to like take skin splices and examine you under a microscope before we allow you to punch somebody. And to me, it's just like, it's a sport. Is there any way to just start doing weight class? Or, we got plenty of ways to measure things. How hard can people hit? And then you put them up against.
No, I mean, that's really not workable, because if you've gone through male puberty, even if you're the same weight as the woman, you're going to be much stronger.
Well, yeah, then do those dumb things that like the science channels used to do, where they punch like gel torsos and figure out how hard you punch and put the same punching class.
I really don't think it's complicated. I think the IBA standard under which they were disqualified is correct. It sucks. You want to not put your child in that position, have them tested young before they dedicate their lives to that sport, because you want to make this argument in other areas. And honestly, I wouldn't agree with it in other areas either, but you can make this argument much more in track than you can in combat sports. I think combat sports, that's just common sense. If you have male chromosomes, and there are, they always go to safetyism. Oh, these sex tests, we're going back to the old days. They used to be horrible. No. Well, in the old days, they didn't have genetic tests. Nobody's going to be putting their hands in anyone's junk. They'll take a blood test, and if it comes up, you have male chromosomes. Sorry, you can't compete in the women's category. Now, you want to say
I think that's fair.
They should give opportunities to people who don't neatly fit in these categories to compete in other areas, have open categories. I'm all for that. And you know what? When you poll people, most people are not, as to Keaton's point in his shitpost, most people are not mean. Most people are
No, they're
actually
not.
for that if you ask them that. Like, do you agree with open categories? Most people are for it. But you ask them, do you think people who are biologically male should be competing against women? Overwhelmingly, they're going to say no. Now, this is complicated because they are intersex, but in the end, because of their chromosomes, they have certain advantages. Now, I just before we finish up, I want to make a point and I want to make a commitment. If you feel like this is, there are so many things happening in the world that should be focused on over this thing that got just incredible attention this week. The way I described it was a story like this was like every liberal has waited their entire life to virtue signal off this story. They could not wait to tell you how much they are for these boxers and their right to box. And the same thing with the right-wing dipshits. They could not be more horrible and abusive than they were, as I showed you in some tweets. But let's look at something that didn't get any attention. Let's look at something that didn't get any attention. This is Sakobi Marsalat of the Congo. She lost her fight and got emotional, then threw her hand across her mouth while pointing 2 fingers to her head. Sakobi made the gesture to signify that people are being killed in her country, but that no one is speaking out to stop it. Now, in a sane world, this would have been the talk of the week. This would have been what everyone was talking about, not this issue of intersex boxers. So my commitment is I am going to cover that story next Sunday. By the time I saw this, it was too late to cover it today. But I am making that commitment to the audience. We will cover that story in depth next Sunday.
Thank you, Russell. That's great.
With as much focus as I gave to this. That is my promise.
Yes.
Because I got to make up for this fucking story. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go through the super chats before we go to West Berlin. The Rumble rants we'll do on the other side. All right. So SB, let me take this off the screen. It's a horrible image. SB, socialists shouldn't give a fuck about democracy. Follow China. This opposition is responsible for starving children. Take care of them. Hint, hint. Listen, man, thank you. That's a goddamn honest argument. That's all I wanted to hear. That's honest. That's an honest argument. Stu D, I choose to look at the size of the crowds in support and opposition more than I trust any institution. So yeah, I think Maduro won it. Okay. Are you in Venezuela? You're down there right now?
Russell.
Tell me what the crowds look like.
Russell. Die on the culture hill. Not on the Venezuela hill.
Give
it up, my bro.
Look, man. People pays their money. I'm gonna give.
You don't know when the time was. You don't know if we had already come to our mea culpa, and you're just reading about getting mad.
Yeah, I'm not mad.
Okay.
I'm having the time of my life. Yadira Ramirez, Maduro stands equal AMLO stands. Dad can do no wrong. Well, see, go ahead. You can go off now.
Thank you, Yadira. I like AMLO.
All right, so you can read Landro's chat while I get to his personal sound drop.
Okay, Landrew, thank you for the $100. What is the Harris platform? It's not on her website, only a donation button. Can Israel survive with war with Lebanon, heroes of Yemen, Iran, and Hamas heroes? Now that Israel has destroyed itself, Palestine is free. Thank you, Landrew.
Landrew is dead.
Very, very, very generous. Palestine is not yet free. They are still fighting their war for liberation. We hope that they're successful in that, but they still have a long road to go, and we just need to be supportive.
All right. John Freese, $9.99. I think the Chavistas have done a good job educating the majority of the population against Western imperialism and that Maduro is a good leader. They are also prepared for war. Freud is overrated. Well, I guess except for the third of the country that fled. I guess they missed out on their education. Barbara Howard, $20.
He's just gonna triple down, y'all.
Venezuelan politics are heavily framed by class and race. That's true. The conservatives, yeah. Nobody ever talks about this. Yes, absolutely. The conservatives being the white descendants of Spaniards, the old ruling class. The socialists are from the mostly indigenous working class. Absolutely true. Yeah. And that's not talked about.
Yeah, that's what, well, it is talked about plenty. That's what we call the comprador class in traditional theory. The compradors.
Well, it's talked about in your cell. But it's not that conversation is not out in the open as much as it should be. Even when I read like left Venezuela line sources, they don't usually get into that angle. I don't know why. Sparky, $10. My voice mimics landline telephone touchstone, so I got out of the habit of speaking on the phone because it would randomly freak out telephone equipment. May no longer apply, maybe sometime. All right, man, we'd love to hear from you. You support us so much, man. You should get your money's worth. Come on and speak your piece. I promise I'll be nice. Shine a bell, E. I made the same observation you did, Russ. I've seen a lot of people post about the Muslim boxer being wrongfully harassed who have had nothing to say about Muslims being slaughtered in Gaza. That too. That's actually, for me, that was the reason the story got my attention. Not as much the gender as the culture war element of it, because the libs who haven't had shit to say about that fell all over each other. They were trampling each other to tell you how much they support these boxers. It's so moronic. It's really, it makes me sick, man. Brandon Guillory, the same level of evidence as the Israel baby vids. You gotta tell us exactly what you mean, but you gotta pay more. Philip Blair, J.K. Rowling.
That was a bad Keaton impression. That was just a bad Keaton.
J.K. Rowling's drag king name is Robert Galbraith. No, she's written books under that, right? No, I think she's written books under that. Isabel Jimenez. If they have extra testosterone, organic or not, they should compete in the enhanced games. Otherwise, it's cheating. I mean, yeah, I think there should be a category for them to compete, but not against women. Otherwise, why have the category? Do more digging, read DSD, read papers on the subject.
I think that's directed to me. I hear you laugh, but I don't care.
Yeah, she's listen, man. She eats, drinks, and shits the revolution. Don't you understand that yet about her? Sparky, establishment liberals use the exceptions which prove the rule. Exactly. They take the outliers and claim that they invalidate categories. Tates, in case you forget, ADL claims that they train FBI. I've heard that.
Yeah.
Sparky, $10. Yo, man, what do you do for a living, Sparky? I want your next super chat to be about that. What do you do? As a kid and young man, I couldn't wait to watch the Olympics. Now I couldn't care less. It's a shame. It was once a positive cultural thing. Don't even know what it is anymore. Listen, man, at the risk of giving a facile take, just a cliche take, but it's honestly what I think. Yeah, man. I mean, all of this postmodernism, woke shit, it just fucking destroys the value of everything it touches. It really does. Whether it's movies, whether it's sport, whether it's academia, just everything it touches goes just unbelievably sideways.
I don't know. I seem to remember whenever I was a kid and the Olympics were on, I seem to remember wherever it would go dark around 7. My parents didn't want me playing outside in the street, so they would call me in. Oh, look, there's the figure skating competition, just what a young girl would like to see, that's on prime time at 8.
Right.
And, so, look, maybe that stuff is just more magical. Maybe the costumes and the fanfare and all that type of stuff are just more magical whenever you're a kid.
Did they open the ceremony with bearded men dressed in cocktail dresses?
No, they didn't.
But
I'm just saying, no. I don't even know if I would have remembered. I'm just saying maybe it's just something that like people just remember.
Maybe today you'd be bearded man in a cocktail dress if they had.
Maybe I already am.
Maybe you are. Maybe you are.
Yeah.
All right, Timica. Everyone like Michael Phelps should be banned. I mean, you could make an argument.
Let's do it.
Stan Lee had a TV show. The show wasn't that great, but the premise was pretty interesting. You do have these freakish people, man. He would show people who could like tow a ship, like literally could swim and tow not like a rowboat, like a ship. There are people with these freakish abilities that are just outside of normal human range.
Should
they be allowed to compete?
I say we should just immediately switch all athletics to robotics. And so all of the robots have to be in the same weight class, have the same processors. And so they have to be truly equal before they can go up and have a fight. And I think that would be the best way to look at any athletic competition. Like, I mean, this is almost what this sounds like. We're really getting into the weeds on this.
Well, Rod Serling, it was one of the best episodes of The Twilight Zone, had a future where the boxers were robots. So maybe one day. The problem, musically assured destruction. The problem boils down to biological determinism, which is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Millions of years of evolution. Timica, women boxing existed 100 years before XXXY discovery. Yeah, I think that's part of what they were talking about. I think they tested for testosterone, but I don't know when they started doing that. Sparky, establishments really messed up women's sports, destroying decades of progress. I agree. I agree with that, man. There's Paralympics and Special Olympics. Maybe there should be Mutant Olympics. Well, maybe there should be an open category Olympics. Let's be nice. All right, folks, we are going to flee. We're going over the wall to breathe the sweet air of freedom at dudissidents.com/rumble, where we can speak our minds for reals. Where we can do all kinds of stuff we can't do here.
I'm just going to say, I think most of your audience is probably very unhappy with me, but that's fine.
With you? Why?
I don't know why. I don't feel like my take satisfies anyone. Like, I just really don't feel like it does.
They love you. All right. So on the other side, look at all the super chats you get. Singling out your exquisiteness. All right, folks, so we're going to the other side. If you are a patron, start your engines for the call-in portion of the evening. Otherwise, we will be back Tuesday, and Keaton will be back, and I can go back to fucking off. Yes.
Me
all
too.
All right. So what? So go ahead. Do the Keaton part.
Oh my God. I know your part. All right, guys. Thank you, dissidents. Have a great night.
Be safe. Be well.
Be safe and be well.
Courage.
Please clap.